Well, then the video audience won't get to hear that little first part. We have this going, right, though?
That's recorded.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, for those of you that are joining us in audio, you have missed the first little part, but we're just talking about your construction business and that it's going pretty well. And construction seems to be going pretty well everywhere, which I just find very, very interesting, especially home construction. See, we were thinking about doing remodeling here. In fact, I don't know if you noticed our living room, the whole big old square of tile missing because it had bubbled up. And so I just took it up because I got tired of it bouncing and then water underneath it. And,
Right.
but we haven't done anything because I don't want to spend any money right now.
No, and there's a lot of people like that, but
Yeah.
there's other people that, man, they're ready to go.
When there's no work, is it time to spend all your money? That's how they're thinking, huh?
I guess so.
See, when anyone asks me my advice on this, I told them don't spend any money. Cut your expenses way down. Cut your living expenses
right.
down to minimum. Save every penny you can. Who knows what's going to happen, how long it's going to last.
Well, in construction, that's what we're doing. We're trying to keep our expenses tight. We're not doing anything but we're not remodeling our offices or doing anything like that. We're staying very conservative as a contractor so that we can keep our resources because we just don't know how long this is going to last.
No, you have no idea. I mean, it looks like it's kicking up again, right? I mean, it's hard to know. I look at the data and the reports and especially in the news, and it's just, to me, it's very hard to know what's actually happening.
Yeah, it is because there's a lot of false reporting going on out there, and
Seems to be.
and a lot of people trying to tweak a lot of the statistics to their own advantage. And,
Yeah.
so it's hard to trust what's going on.
You got the full-on pandemic-minded people that want to drive up the numbers, it seems like to me. And then you have the I'll never wear a mask, right, ever people on the other side that want to say, no, this is all, no one actually has it.
No, the answer has got to be somewhere in the middle somewhere.
It can't be either one of those two
Yeah,
sides.
we're not sure. I mean, we've had clients that in some of the smaller remodels that have said, yes, we have tested positive for COVID, but please come because we need our remodeling done. And if you die, you die.
Has anybody working for you tested positive? Any of your
Yes.
employees?
Yeah, we've had several, no employees, but we've had several subcontractors that have had to quarantine because they've tested positive.
And how long does it normally last for them? How long are they sick of it?
Let's see, we've had some plumbers out, and I think they were out about 14 days, didn't get real sick, so they're back on the job now. I had a flooring installer from the previous company that got sick, and he ended up passing away last month.
Oh, from that?
From COVID.
Oh.
And then we've had several others get
How old
sick.
was he?
He was mid-60s,
Okay.
but and he had diabetes, so
Okay.
but didn't appear to be very sick before, so
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. His wife got it, and she recovered completely, and then we've had one of the homeowners came down with it. One of our homeowners that we're doing a remodel for is a doctor, and he came down with it. But 14 days later, he was clear, and we're back in his house now.
Oh, okay.
We're real careful not to touch anything that we're not supposed to touch.
Nobody I know has ever had it, but I have a friend, a very, very, very close friend who works in Division 10 Specialties who had two employees who had it. I don't know those people personally. This is just I heard in the grapevine. But they recovered very quickly. I mean, like, had a cough, a little bit of illness, and then recovered very quickly.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's just
odd.
really hard to tell how it's going to affect somebody.
And so, how's it going as far as the church? What are you guys thinking there in your church?
Well, what we've done, of course, when the shutdown first happened, we went to home meetings, and then our very wise mayor, no political statements here, but he brought down the gatherings to 10 people, and so when that happened, that pretty much shut down our home meetings. So then that's when we went to televised services like you guys did.
Yeah.
And we did that for a while, and then we started a meeting in the parking lot where the baptistry is. We put a stage.
Yeah, I saw
it. Yeah, it worked
It
out
looked
pretty
awesome.
good.
It looked
Yeah.
cool. I like it. And the canopy and everything.
Yeah, so we practiced social distancing. I mean, we were serving popcorn, hot dogs,
Right.
but it became very relaxed, and we actually kind of miss it when we were in the parking lot. Just about not every service, but we had Sunday morning and Sunday night, and just about every service we had somebody driving by that would stop, drive in, park, and listen to the messages. It was just a really amazing thing.
That is amazing. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
We had one where there was a big four-wheel drive truck, 4 young men in the four-wheel drive truck, and they came in, and David and I got up, and we were going to run them off. They were just disrupting us, and turns out they were interested, and they parked, sat on top of their truck, and they listened to the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
So we were even considering about doing that once a month as kind of an outreach.
Yeah.
And it just, but we enjoyed meeting in the parking lot, and now we're back in the building again.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a little bit awkward, trying to do the social distancing and all that. But we've just decided we're going to try to be careful. We sterilize after the end of the service, and we do what we can, but we've decided not to wear the social distancing police armbands.
Oh, no? You're not doing the social distancing police salute?
No, I was at Home Depot, and I saw a guy with this was early on. They've since stopped wearing them, but he had a yellow vest with social distancing enforcement
Oh, good
written
grief.
on it. And I offered him money for it, good money. I said I wanted it for a keepsake, and he wouldn't sell it to me. But
That's
they're
funny.
not doing that anymore.
And so what are you guys doing for social distancing? Are you just the recommendations and letting people do what they want? Or are you actually like, hey, 6 feet?
We did that the first Sunday.
Uh-huh.
And cut our attendance in half.
Yeah.
We're called names,
You have no faith.
Oh, yeah.
Do you get any of that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just trust God. And I said,
If God wants you to get it, you're going to get it.
that's exactly right. So basically what we do when you're sitting down in your little section, you're supposed to sit with your family. And once you sit down, you can take your mask off. But if you're moving around, we ask you to put your mask on. And it was funny because one Sunday night during Lord's Supper, one of the men forgot to put his mask on when he was passing out the Lord's Supper. And I was like, and he was like,
well, we're supposed to wear masks at work. And I mostly don't, hardly ever.
all day long?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, most of the jobs now they're saying they're 100% masks at work, and we're in these bathrooms all by like if we're in an elevator, I think they're silly, and it's not that I don't think that masks in theory could work, but what I'm looking at is just theater, right? Because they're putting it on, they got it here. I saw one thing where they put 2 masks on so they can breathe between them. They put a mask here and a mask here, and when they open their mouth, they can drink and stuff. It's just a lot of theater, is what I look at. It to me, it's almost like taking a real gun and making it look like a toy gun, so it's safer. Mm-hmm. To me, that actually makes it less safe. So it's not that I think masks don't work; it's that I don't think that the way I see masks being used have any possibility of working. To me, it's just a bunch of nonsense. But, they want it 100% or whatever. But we're in these bathrooms all by ourselves. And it's like, I'm in here all by myself. Why do I need to wear a mask?
Yeah, that's always super fun because the superintendents, people in charge of the building, they'll come in, they'll see me without my mask. It's like, you need to put your mask on, you're going to get sick. So they watch me reach into my pocket and pull out this old grummy, nasty looking, full of grease mask, and I'm putting it over my face, and it's all nasty. And they're okay, better. That's much safer. You almost got sick.
When the only chance we have of getting sick is him coming in telling us to put our mask on.
Well, I got in trouble at Lowe's one time because I was in the checkout line, and I got a chronic cough anyway, so this is not a good time of the year for
Everybody who's coughing says they have a chronic cough.
me. Yeah. But I don't want to get my mask all messed up, so I went like this and put my mask back on, and they freaked out.
That's what I mean. This is it's so silly. It's just complete theater.
What I've done now is, and I've switched. I've gone to the face coverings, that we use in construction for dust and all of that. I've just gone to the wraparound face coverings. I wear it around my neck. I pull it up if somebody needs it. If I'm walking into a store, I don't have to worry about. And they're very thin. They're not going to affect my breathing at all.
Yeah.
But at work on the job sites, we don't mask. The only time we mask is if we're doing a remodel in a house where somebody is living in the house.
Right.
And then, of course, we're much stricter.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, I wear them when I go in the elevators in the job sites because, I don't think I'm making a difference, but it makes a difference to the people in there. So it's like, all right. Fine. And everywhere else is like nobody has any reason to be near me. If they're near me, that's their problem. I'm not working. I don't work in bathrooms where the plumbers are at. We used to do that, right? Go in there and try to work her out. It's like I tell the GCs that if they want us there, they have to get everyone out. And so there's no reason for anyone to be within 20 feet of me.
Right.
Right. Yeah, but I've gotten cantankerous a little bit, right, Nolan? Just a little bit. It's like to a point where I'm like, send me home. I don't want to be here anyways. I just soon not be here. Just tell me never to come back. That would make me so happy.
Well, I actually put a post on Facebook, and because I was in Lowe's the next day after the situation with Nelson Wolf, and I put on Facebook that I was looking around to make sure he wasn't there.
Yeah, I saw that. That was funny. Did you see that video with him? What happened with him?
It was, yeah. Yeah, it was
that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to be nice, but it was interesting.
I thought that guy overreacted a little, but didn't realize. I mean, what luck is that to be in line with Nelson Wolf, right? I mean, just the worst luck possible.
No,
you're already mad that you think they're all conspiring against you. The world's, the New World Order's taking over, and you're wearing the mask of the beast and all this stuff, right? And then you have someone tap you on the shoulder and try to give you something, and so you overreact, and it turns out to be the judge. It's like,
I know.
How could your day get any worse?
The one who wrote the law.
I know. It's exactly. How could it get any worse, right?
Yeah, basically, I try not to make a big deal out of it.
Yeah.
I wear masks for the sake of others. And that's why we do it at church too. We're doing it to make somebody feel more comfortable to come to our services if they know that we're at least trying to mitigate.
At least trying to pretend to look like you're doing it.
Right. And we're not pressuring anybody to come to church either.
Yeah.
And now the same is not true for construction, because I went to some people in authority in the company, and I said, look, I think I need I've been exposed to all these people. And they said, well, put on your mask and come back to work. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But it is a very interesting time.
It's crazy time. Now, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going? Are you guys doing any type of evangelism other than like virtual, but like door knocking or street preaching or anything like that still going on?
Some of the guys are still preaching on the streets.
How's that going?
I don't know. I'm not going with them, but apparently it's going okay. I haven't heard any negative reactions. I think Bill and some of the others are still doing their weekly. I know that they stopped the street preaching in front of the Alamo for a while. I don't think so much because of COVID, but because of all the protests and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but early on, I think some of them are starting to pick up on it now. But as far as the door-to-door stuff, we pretty much stopped that for the time being.
I would imagine. I would think that would be a hard sale right there.
Yeah.
Two guys show up to your door
in masks.
In masks.
Yeah.
Bang. This is the one time where it's like, do they have masks on? No. Okay. Don't answer the door.
Yeah.
Only if they have masks on do we answer the door. Can you imagine? You look at the people, and it's like if they have a mask, like, oh, it's safe. They're wearing masks.
I know.
Two masked men are here. We can answer the door to them.
Well, this is a hold-up man's dream.
I know.
They can walk around the store, wait for their opportunity with nobody calling them out. Or
here when you go into Rob now, you take your mask off and then put it on
you go.
and do the opposite. It was two unmasked men. They robbed us.
Yeah. But if you're going to ask me what I think is going to happen, I've got no clue. I mean,
well, what I really am curious what you think is, I mean, not what you think might happen as far as with this and how it runs, but let's say hypothetically that it picks back up and it's worse than it was the first time. What do you foresee? What are you guys thinking about as far as church meetings and stuff?
if it gets worse than the first time, and we'll probably go back to parking lot meetings. That seemed to work real well for us. And if it gets to where they outlaw the parking lot meetings, we'll just go back to virtual for a while.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go back to being online. A lot of it'll just depend on what the limitations come down. You know, what the mayors decide and what the governor decides,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll just have to base it, on that.
How do you think that works? Let's say, what if this is something that goes on for years, and it's real? Let's just assume that and I don't mean it's not real, but I mean like it's really like catastrophic. Because I don't think it's been that way. I mean, I look at the numbers, and just by the numbers themselves, it doesn't seem to me to be this catastrophic disease. But it could be, and I have no idea. Right? So we could start seeing, it could mutate, and we could start seeing extremely high death tolls, and not just in 81-year-old sickly people, but in everybody, right? And just bodies piled up in the streets. What is your view of what the church does at that time?
It's an interesting thing because I'm like you. I compare it with 1918
Mm-hmm.
and see kind of how that pandemic played out then, with the fact that they didn't have as many different kinds of antibiotics and different things to be able to treat the disease with. But if it got that bad, then it'd be a challenge as to whether do you have meetings and then just sacrifice your people, or do you go virtual online? One of the advantages I think that we have now that they didn't have in 1918, and this goes not only for churches, but it also goes for business in general, is our technology has really saved us in a lot of ways. All three of my kids are all working from home, and they have been since March. None of them have lost their jobs. They haven't had any reduction in income. They'd be able, because of technology, to work from home. You've got a lot of companies like Dell is where Matthew works. He's doing that. They're considering eliminating a lot of buildings. They're going to restructure their plant and equipment type deal, and they're going to put a lot of people home permanently.
Yeah, I was talking to Adam, and he was saying that USA is thinking of doing much more, even if this goes away, that they're starting to like this. Well, basically, they're outsourcing their office space to the people's homes.
That's exactly right. And people, I guess employees need to wake up and say, hey, I want compensation.
Yeah, well, I mean, AC is going to go up for them because they're going to be home instead of cranking their AC up during the daytime hours.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to actually have to be running it when it's hottest out.
Right.
And more electricity, internet bandwidth, all of that's going to be... The companies are offloading these expenses onto their employees in many ways.
That's true. But even some of the smaller ones, we've got a sister in the church that she's like a legal aid, and her lawyer has shut down the office, and they're going to do virtual. They're going to work from home, and she's not going to pay office space anymore.
That's brilliant, actually.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean,
so I'm thinking in those terms, the church is probably going to have to do somewhat the same thing. We're going to have to take advantage of technology, and one of the things that we were looking at the last couple of weeks is we've noticed that our YouTube videos have been so subpar, been very, just our cameras and our sound and everything. And yet we have anywhere from 30 to 45 hits every Sunday on YouTube. And so we got together and decided we need to really try to upgrade this.
Yeah.
So we're working on our cameras now. We're trying to spend the money and get things to where our online presence is much easier to
you had a different, it looks like you had a different strategy before all this started, which was to give some type of a meeting to people who were at home, couldn't come to church that day, and you weren't really thinking of it as didn't look to me like the strategy was to have a full out like online experience
Right.
for the casual visitor. It's more like the person who is sick, or maybe they're on vacation or whatever, and they wanted just to keep tabs with what was going on.
Right.
Kind of because the camera was far away, the sound wasn't.
Yeah.
One thing though, just as a little tidbit there that I've learned is the video is less important than the audio. It seems strange, and I thought when I first started, I thought video would matter more. Because it's YouTube, right? It's video. Everything I've read, everything I've done personally, audio is number one.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. The video, people will, like when I first started doing videos, like scripted videos, I would want them to like, get the transitions and all this, and not necessary.
They want to be able to hear it.
It has to be the audio. If the audio is good, I mean really good, which is why I buy these microphones, which are expensive. If the audio is good, that goes a lot further than the video being good.
That's a good point.
It's very interesting.
Because if you listen to somebody on the radio and it's gravelly, or you listen to these talk shows and there's one caller that just his cell phone's going in and out, it irritates you.
Yes.
And you switch the channel right
That's
away.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And if you're watching video, most people now watching YouTube are watching it on their phone, so you don't need 4K, right? Video. You need this because they're not, and a lot of them are watching it while they're driving, right? So they're not really. We hope they're not really paying attention. Yeah, I would put a lot of effort into your audio, getting your audio.
That's a good point.
Getting your audio really clear, really just getting the room dead in the bass in the room, and getting the audio where it sounds good. The problem we have is that we're in this gymnasium, and it's like preaching inside of a guitar, right?
Yeah.
So it's like really hard. We have a hard. We're not sure how to address that ourselves because we can't do anything to the room.
Right. And then you guys said, I noticed the other day you guys were get online because you showed up to the building and nobody was there to unlock it.
Yeah, I know, right? That's the problem with not owning your own building.
Yeah.
We're completely at the mercy. So we have to contend with whatever the governor says, the mayor, the judge, or whatever, whoever they are. But then also you have the YMCA who rents to us. They could just decide, hey, we don't want any liability. We don't want any risk. We're just not going to do it. We don't care that the mayor says it's okay or whoever.
Right.
We don't want the liability. We don't want to expose ourselves to being sued for having people in here and then someone gets sick. So we're just not doing it, which is what I would have done.
Right.
If it would have been me running the YMCA, I would have said, no, you guys aren't coming back.
Yeah, the liability is huge.
It's just not worth it. We don't pay hardly anything. It costs us like $700 a month to rent that place for every Sunday.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That doesn't even pay for the guy. They have to have a person there to open and be there while we're there. So they're paying somebody to be there on Sunday for the entire time we're there.
So the building's not open for other activities on Sunday anyway. So
it's
you're
closed.
the only tenant.
Yeah. So they're opening their building and running their utilities and paying somebody to be our doorman, basically, for $700 a month. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, we got such a great deal at that. It worked out so good for us. We were at that building and we were paying, well, time you factored in all the utilities and everything involved in that, it was probably about $5,000 a month is what we were paying. And we got tired of that, and we decided we're not paying rent like that anymore. We're either going to build something, we're going to figure something else out. And we found the YMCA, and it was $700 a month. So that was fantastic, right? And so we were very happy. And then this happened, and we were really happy. Then we're thinking, man, God took care of us.
Because you would have been paying all that money and not have the
we would have
advantage
been
of
on a 2-year, another 2-year. Our contract had just finished at the end of that year, right? In December.
Isn't that amazing? That was the Lord taking care of you
That
guys.
was the Lord, and we
it
weren't
looked
too
like
happy.
a curse, but
it did.
Yeah, it looked like a curse. Like, what's going on? But it actually was a blessing to you.
Yes, it was. By March, we're looking at that going, thank you, Lord Jesus. It is good that we don't always get what we want.
And in March and April, she hardly saw a human being. The dining hall would take her meals to her door, knock on her door, and then leave. And then she would come out and get her food. It was like being in solitary confinement.
What did that do to her? How did she handle that?
She had started having delusions and started hallucinating, and it started affecting her mind. not having that social interaction. We tried to get her set up on an iPad to where we could do FaceTime and everything with her, but she could just never really get to it. And we finally took her out of there. My brothers that live in Tucson, they took her out and they put her in another place where now she's around other people and she's doing just fine. But I can imagine a lot of these elderly folks that are in nursing homes and those that are sick in hospitals where they can't get visitors. We're going through a real problem in that respect in society.
Yeah.
Where we have a lot of these, the social distancing, I think, has gone so far as to really put people in the shadows. And I've noticed in the church, excuse me, I've noticed in the church that you get these comments on YouTube Sunday morning, and the comments are, hey, who's online? Hey, Frankie, how you doing?
Yeah.
And they start talking to each other online, and then somebody else, hey, get back to the message. Listen to the message. It's almost like they're using it, and then you constantly get requests, hey, pan the crowd. Pan it again. I don't see who I want to see, And so in that sense, they're itching for that social interaction. So if something got really bad, it'd be a real challenge for us to try to jump that hurdle so people could still get that one-on-one interaction.
Yeah, the communion.
The communion with the fellowship of the church, So, I'm hoping it's not going to get that bad. I don't think it will. I think we always tend to overblow things. But given what's happened, from what I saw, the end of December 31st, we'd had a bad year last year, so I'm thinking 2020 is going to be good. If I'd only been a prophet.
Yeah. See, the problem that I see is that churches like ours that have a more than average, let's say above average perspective on the body ministry. I don't want to say we're not the only ones. There's churches that have all kinds. They may not have an open meeting the way we think of it, but there's a lot of churches that have a lot of participation from everybody in their church in different ways. But the common Christian, I would say, is not really there. They go, they hear the preaching, their participation is in the worship service, right? They sing, they'll have, and that's extensive. That's not to be dismissed, I don't think. But that's the extent of probably many Christians' interaction in the church, where they actually are really a part of it, where they don't have an open meeting or something like that. They teach a Sunday school class. But in ours, where it's built on that idea, right? The whole meeting is built on the idea of the body participating. It makes it very hard to imagine what church is going to look like if we have to go all virtual.
It would. I know something that Judy's done, since we couldn't have Vacation Bible School this year, and that's one of my wife's big ministries and something she prepares for all year long, having that big Vacation Bible School, and we use it to get the neighborhood kids in, and it's a big deal. And she couldn't have it this year, and so what they've done instead is she's gotten a list of everybody that came last year, and she's been going around to 4, 5, 6 houses a week. And when it was a little bit stricter as far as the actual rules, they would pull up in front of the house and they would text the mom, "Hey, we're here." Kids would come out in the front yard. They'd have a mini little 1-hour Vacation Bible School right there. She'd give them a bunch of stuff, and they'd sing a few songs and with their masks on, or whatever, whatever the parents were comfortable with. And then she would,
awesome.
Pack up and drive on. So, and the kids being home from school all this time and just going stir crazy, they just couldn't get enough of it. So she's gone around to all the kids, and she's actually going to go do it again. And so things like that. Faith graduated from high school, Bernie's daughter, and we did a drive-by graduation party for her. Had like 20 cars all piled down the road with balloons and stickers.
Right.
And she would be in her front yard under a little canopy, and we would drive by one, honk the horn, do whatever and give her gifts. And so I'm sure that there's ways around it. It's not the ideal, but I think in one sense, I think it may be a blessing in disguise because it's going to force us. We get lazy. We're very lazy, and when it comes time to innovate, and when it comes time to figure out ways around, we tend to want to just, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're always going to do it.
Yeah, we can't. It's hard to imagine doing it in any other way that would work, right? Because we're not human beings. We're not very creative, actually. We think we are, and we're certainly more creative than monkeys or dogs, but we're really not. I mean, without something really forcing our hand, we don't tend to just say, hey, this has been working great. Let's tear it all down and try something different.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, my little brother, he was a pastor of a church in New York for a while, and he had a chance to go to China and have a meeting with some pastors over there through one organization. And in the middle of one of the meetings, they met in a conference room at a hotel. And in the middle of the meeting, they stopped him and they said, brother, pause, go up to your room. And Dan is like, go up to my room? What are you talking about, go up to my room? Did I do that bad? And all the way up to his room, he was escorted by 2 Chinese pastors. And all the way up to the room, they wouldn't tell him anything. They wouldn't talk to him. They wouldn't do nothing. And he's like, oh, man. He said, I forgot to read all of the cultural handbook that they gave me beforehand. And so he stayed in his room. An hour later, they came and got him and brought him back. And what had happened is that somebody had tipped off the police that there was a meeting of Christians. And so they had already set it up to where it looked like a business meeting. And that's how they portrayed it, as a business meeting. And they explained it to him when he got back. Oh, it's just that, the police came, so we had to get rid of you. And we had to make it look like a business meeting, which it was. We were doing the business of the Lord.
Yeah.
And so after that, Dan said, okay, turn in your employee manuals to Ephesians chapter 4. So the point being is that China, the believers in China, because of persecution, have had to get very creative in the way that they do their meetings. And so I don't foresee a pandemic necessarily lasting that long, but I do see the fact that you have some of these little kings that are in municipalities, in governorships, that all of a sudden are enjoying a great deal of social power.
Yeah.
They've got the ability to be able to dictate and shut down and write tickets. And so if that continues, then just look at something like what's going on in California, when they tried to mandate that Christians could meet, but you can't sing. No singing allowed. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if it's, I read an article that there were upwards of 1,000 churches in California that decided that they were going to defy that order. And if we're going to meet, we're going to sing. We're just going to do this. So, and I understand the singing part. They're not necessarily trying to force their hand on religion itself. They're just trying to keep transmission of disease.
Right. Singing is, if you think that it can be transmitted through droplets, then and this has been my contention from the beginning. If you really think that, then you should not be having church meetings. It's just, there's nothing done in church that's not going to exacerbate the contagion.
Right.
Because everything is loud. You speak loud, you sing loud, you say amen loud, and that expels droplets into the air.
Right.
And that's what it does. And so I've been resistant to the idea that this is like them trying to, that anyone's trying to put thumb screws to the church, like it's an anti-religion thing. To me, it's like, no, everything we do in a church is by necessity loud, and that does that.
Yeah, and they have a point there. It's just that if they can start, if they have this taste, then
that would be.
Then it's a possibility
that
if Christianity becomes more and more unpopular, and the political situation changes to where they start putting more pressure on us, then we're going to have to be more creative in how we meet anyway.
Yeah.
And I remember when we first shut down, it was a revolution to some people because we picked and we decided who the leaders were going to be. We picked seven main leaders, and we divided them up into certain quadrants of town. And then everybody was directed where their meet at this person's house, contact them, and then that person became responsible for that individual group. And I wished we'd have had a chance to let that go a little bit longer, because what it did is, number one, it woke up a lot of people. And all of a sudden now we don't have our building, we don't have this traditional hub that we normally are used to having. Now we've got to split up. And in our, I was assigned to Trumbo Road, and most of the people on Trumbo Road were offended with us years ago. So I didn't have a lot of, I didn't have a great deal of people that I thought were going to come. And at my first home meeting, most of the ones that came were not Christians. I was like, this is amazing.
That is amazing.
This is amazing. So we were supposed to do, we had a regiment, we're supposed to do this, supposed to do the Lord's Supper. And once I saw that, I completely disbanded the program and just catered it to the people that came. And we had some great meetings. And so it's...
Well, there's a lot of churches that just swear by what they call small groups, which is basically small home meetings during the week. I mean, there are a lot of churches that have gone to doing that, and I have family members whose churches do that, and they think that's the greatest thing ever. They're very, because it gets them. I don't know if they realize it, but it's really putting them closer to what we've been trying to do in the church services, which is the open meeting, really, right?
Right.
And it gets them basically into that, and even more so because it's laid back, it's informal, and it's a lot of fellowship. So you're really getting to know people in the church, as opposed to, especially when a lot of the churches doing this are big churches. They're not 200 people churches. They're 5,000 people churches.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't know anybody. There's no way, even if they said, hey, we're just going to have a time of fellowship so you can get to know everybody. Well, that would take 3 years of just milling around to get to know everyone. So, they're doing that. They're doing these small, and then you find a group, and those groups are divvied up, whether it be by ages or geographic locations or by business interests. I mean, they have all different ways of making these little groups.
For these large churches, it's the way to go.
Yeah.
These core meetings. And we had thought too about possibly even converting some of our traditional building, like say for example Sunday night Lord's Supper, and switch to complete home meetings that night instead of everybody trying to get to the church. I think we'd get more people overall meeting and get a little bit more of that dynamic. But it's interesting.
Yeah, that is. It's real strange, and I'm not sure exactly how we would proceed. I mean, we have it week to week. We don't know whether or not they're going to open. We don't know whether we're going to have. We could get there any day. So basically, we have this set up here, and we can come back. We just come back here and stream if that happens.
Right.
And that worked okay for us. We have a lot of viewers. Well, I say a lot. I mean, a couple hundred maybe watch what we do, which is nothing really in the scheme of YouTube or any type of the big ministries. It's nothing.
Right.
But we have a couple hundred people or so that watch the stuff we put out, and so we could do that. But my problem with it is like, what do you do as far as, I mean, that becomes just like a preaching, right? You're just speaking to them.
Right.
But how do you get the body ministry in that? So we've thought about Zoom, where you actually have everybody in there and you can all talk. We've tried a little bit. We haven't done it wholeheartedly on that. We've just done YouTube. But we have thought about that, where you could have like an open meeting in Zoom and do something maybe that way. I don't know. It's hard. What we do get a lot of, and we don't discourage, is like you were saying on YouTube, on our videos, we always have a lot of people talking, a lot of chatter, you might call it, on the YouTube channel, which we have no problem with. In fact, me and Mike really wanted to make an app when we first started and have it where in the sermon you could interact with the crowd and with the preacher through texting in the app. Or you could put in questions and stuff, and it would show up on the screens that we have. So it'd be like a live thing, because then they're going to be on a lot. There's going to be people on their phone no matter what, and so our idea was, let's put them on the phone interacting with the service.
Yeah,
That was what we wanted to do. We never got around to doing it. So programming's a lot of work. And so, making that would be hard. But now we have that with YouTube, basically. And so we get a lot of chatter on there about the sermon and, how you doing and jokes and a lot of stuff, which we don't have a problem with. We're fine with that.
Yeah. We had thought about showing that, but we have gotten a couple of comments, like, them Calvinists are at it again. So we do want to filter that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of that. Just in the YouTube, the comments on YouTube, we get a lot of that. But basically, the only one that sees that is the sound man, and whoever else is online at the same time, they can see.
Yeah, and the live chat is who sees that there. Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, we put our comments on hold for review on the comments of the video, and the live view right now, the only ones logging in are people that know us. We haven't had anyone logging in that we don't know, and the live chat.
Right.
But that would be an issue, right? You could get some pretty profane things coming through. Yeah, some hecklers coming in.
Yeah.
Although it's not real effective heckling. You can't. How loud can you type? I mean,
I know, exactly.
It's like, I'll do it all caps. Oh, that disrupted us. and YouTube, and the YouTube live chat is limited to how many characters you can type and how often you can do it, and you can change that. So you can even put it where if that's happening, you can put it where they can only type a little bit and every 2 minutes, which really takes the steam out of the heckling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we've done Zoom at work when we have our production meetings. And we're back now meeting in the conference room, but we did Zoom for a while. And I remember, excuse me.
We're going to have to disinfect this whole room.
Tell you what. Yeah, I've been to doctors and everything, and basically, doctors say they don't know. Most Christians say that it's probably guilty conscience is why that I'm coughing. But we did a Zoom meeting at work, and the very first Zoom meeting, they said, everybody go to your little office area at home, and then we'll have a Zoom from there. And I was working way out in Canyon Lake, and there's no way I'm going to drive 64 miles just to have a Zoom meeting to get to my trailer out there in the Trumbo Road. So I ran over to the boat dock over there, and they were like, "Brian, you going to log in?" Yeah, give me just a second. I said, "There's 2 more boats getting out of the water. As soon as I get out of the water, get out of the water. What are you talking about?" When I came up on Zoom, I had the lake in the background. Okay, I'm ready to go now. He did it. He was really out there fishing.
That's funny.
But there's got to be some way, and we're just going to have to get real creative.
Yeah.
And the other thing is we're going to have to we need to take a lot more effort in keeping in contact with everybody.
Yeah.
Without being a pain in the butt, but keeping in contact with people and
that's
making
one thing,
sure that people are, that they're taken care of. And
that's one thing I noticed that I was very defective in as a pastor was I realized how little I reach out to people. I mean, I don't like people calling me, so I return the favor and not call anyone else. I mean, to me, I'm showing you the courtesy I want, which is don't bother me unless it's really important. And I have to realize that most people don't have that sentiment maybe and would prefer someone calling them a little. My wife was doing a thing before this started. She just started. She wanted to have something to do. She's thought about getting a job, but she doesn't really want to have the commitment of the 9 to 5 and every day. She likes her freedom, but she doesn't want to have nothing to do either. So I encourage her to get into some type of a charity work where she could go and do that, be helpful to them, and gives her something to do. She doesn't necessarily need the money, just that would be a good. So she did. She started doing this thing where you go and take an elderly person. They match you up with 1 or 2 or 3 elderly people, and you take them out for grocery shopping. Help them do their grocery shopping. So you drive them over there. They buy their stuff. You help them get it put away or whatever, and spend a little time with them. And she just started that right before the pandemic started, which of course. She did it a couple times with this one woman, and then it got, obviously, they can't have that anymore. So that got canceled. So then what they've gone to doing is they want them now just to call that person. So like instead of going on, she would go on a Wednesday, I think was her day of going. Well, on Wednesday, she would call her and just talk with her for a while on the phone. see how she's doing. And
That's awesome.
yeah. And so that we probably the church ought to be. You were talking about that, about your mom and people in those situations, and the church probably needs to take on the spirit of James, where he says what true religion is, right? And it's these people that are in these situations, and we probably need to be more careful, especially evangelicals that tend to not gravitate in that direction as much. Right. To be careful in that, because it's going to be exacerbated. Whatever difficulties that category of people had before, this is exacerbating it dramatically.
Now, one of the advantages that we have too is we have several people in the church that are very ministry minded. They're
yes, you do.
They love people more than I will ever love people in my whole
and
life.
You got a real strong group of women that are that way.
And you've got women that are that way.
Yeah.
And several of these people are retired. Some retired early. The women have time. And so I know with my wife, she's been following up on a group of ladies, some of them visitors to the church, and others where maybe not necessarily a pastor going by the house would be a little awkward, where she could go by. And so I see that starting to take place more and more. And it's got to be not just the pastors that do it, because my time is very limited. And so if it was if the whole burden was on me and on Bill, very few people would get reached. But if you have these people in the church that have this mindset, then we'll take care of these people that are on the fringes more and more. But we're gonna have to stop being so lazy.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have to really
that's
make an
well,
effort to.
That's right. That's well said. That's really what it came down to. I think in my case, is just like I allowed myself to get very lazy, and the status quo made that very possible. Where now it's like, well, if you're going to keep a church together when you can't actually meet together, you're going to actually have to put out more of the effort. Is what I found for myself.
Right, and we're the same thing.
And I am by no means a good example yet of that, but I am aware of the need.
You're not a good
so anyone who's
I was modeling myself
I'm horrible.
after you. So
don't do that. So everyone watching right now that's saying that dirty hypocrite, I'm aware. I am aware of my shortcomings. I am very aware. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to get you in here is because I had a lot of requests to talk about child raising on the podcast. And so I wish I could have gotten Dale in. I don't want you to feel bad about this, but...
Oh, I was going to say, with child raising, were you able to find anybody?
Well, so here's the deal. I scraped to the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not joking. No, I really would have loved to got my granddad in here, right? But he's no longer with us, which I thought he was. I just think his advice on that was really good. But when I thought about it, the second best name I come up with that I'd love to talk to about it would be with you.
Really?
Yes, it was. I really admire you on that front. On many, but this one I've always had a strong admiration for you in this, and I just think that your insight on this would be very beneficial to people, and so I wanted to get you in and just talk with you a little bit about raising kids and your perspective on it, because I've always found that your perspective, and we've never talked about it directly, so I don't know. I couldn't say what it is, but it's always struck me to be different than what was. How would you put it? What you would expect out of an evangelical pastor of our stripe, of this strong fundamentalist evangelical. You have a certain view. Maybe it's stereotypical and not true, but I think many people have a. You think fundamentalist, evangelical, Southern Texas, fire brimstone pastor preacher. How are they going to raise their kids? And you never seem to fit in that mold, and which I think is a good thing. I think is a very good thing. And so I just thought it'd be great to get you and talk. And then you have such a diversity. I don't know anybody who in their parenting has had such diversity of challenges.
Oh, right.
Yeah, right. Because you had your second child, right? Was your second? Your second child, Alyssa, was born with some serious disabilities, mental disabilities, and physical disabilities. And you parented her for 24 years, was it?
She was 25.
25. She's the exact same age as my son, or almost exactly. They were
That's
born
right.
same, within within months, I think, apart. What month was she born?
She was born in September.
September, and Cole was born in November.
Yeah.
So they're like 2 months apart in
Right.
age. And so yeah, you mean you had a child like that, and then your sons are brilliant. I mean, they're brilliant minds. And I don't know I don't want to exclude your daughter Elizabeth. I don't know her right, so I haven't talked to her in a long time.
Right.
But I know your sons are very, very intelligent, no disability whatsoever. And so
Right.
so you had the full spectrum of experience, which I think would be very helpful to look at.
Basically controlled chaos.
Yes. So what was it like? Let's start with your daughter Alyssa. One thing that was so interesting to me is you guys had a very unique approach, and to me, I don't have a lot of experience in this, so maybe it's not unique. But to me, it was very odd. Right? I looked at it, and it was like you guys treated Alyssa like a kid. You never really saw that you were treating her like, oh, this is our disabled child, she gets a pass. I never noticed that. I always saw that it was just like she's one of the kids, and she just fit in with the family. And not just in your treatment, but your raising of her, the way you parented, it seemed to be that way.
It didn't start out that way, but early on, we got in with a group because what happened is once she was born, we brought her home after about a year or so, maybe 2. We began to get involved with some support groups trying to get information on doctors, treatments, different things to try to help her out.
What did you tell us a little bit for anyone who's watching that doesn't know? Explain however you're comfortable with, but what exactly her limitations were, her disabilities.
Well, she was born with Down syndrome, and then she also had cerebral palsy. And right away, she had a heart defect in the first months that she was born. She had open heart surgery at 3 months, and then had a lot of surgeries after that, some related to the Down syndrome, some related to the cerebral palsy. And so developmentally, the first year, we really didn't know how severe she was, because obviously when a baby's just starting to move, you don't know exactly. Over time, we began to realize that she had some serious limitations. And so we reached out to some of these support groups because we needed doctors, we needed therapists, we needed to try to figure, and we needed other parents. When you get into a situation where you don't know, you really need somebody who's been there. And they're the only ones. Everybody else is speaking from theory. The ones who've been there, they give the most practical advice. So we got in with this group. It was 4 families. We started out, and they started a new support group for Down syndrome kids. And so we got in ground floor with them, and we were going to help them build it up. Over time, and not to disparage anybody that was in that group trying to help their kids, but what we noticed was this militant attitude. All of a sudden, war was declared on the doctors that aren't going to help your child. War was declared on the school districts that weren't going to produce the resources to help your child. And for many of the parents, there was this demanding,
like entitlement type,
militant, not so
entitlement,
much entitled. Well, yeah, maybe
like
entitlement. Like school districts are supposed to provide this by law. And we noticed for some things within our school district, we came from the Southside School District, so they don't have as many resources as some of the richer school districts do. And we saw the numbers of what they would have been required by law to provide for our daughter. And it was just, it was astronomical. And so we had some of the equipment. We actually lent some of the equipment to the school district to use for our daughter, things like standers and different things physically. And the parents, and many of the parents in these groups, they were like, no, school district has to provide that. They have to do this. The other thing was they became so militant at helping their disabled child that the other kids were background noise. And we saw a real resentment in a lot of the siblings. And this was when Alyssa was simply just a couple of years old. And so we made a decision, Judy and I made a decision that if Alyssa didn't get everything that she needed, she was going to be one of the cogs in the wheel. She was going to be one part of a team, which was our family. She was going to be part of the family, and we weren't going to sacrifice our other kids even if it meant that Alyssa didn't get everything that she could have gotten. And so a lot of people criticized us for that. You know, we should have gone over mountain and dale to do everything possible. But we didn't want to sacrifice the other kids. We didn't feel like that was fair. The other thing that we did is we had advice from many, many people in the ministry and out after we had Alyssa. Look, you shouldn't have any more children because you're going to need all your time to take care of this one. And we defied that too, and we decided to have other kids. And man, it was the best decision we ever made. So basically, the philosophy behind it is that we made a decision to make her part of our family, and she was, and if that meant that one of the other kids got fed first, and then she got fed later, at certain times. In just a normal family, there's always going to be kids that are getting more than others, and there's never going to be equality, and that's okay. And so we decided that that was the case with her. And of course, it couldn't work out perfectly because she did need a lot of extra care. And there was just naturally more time needed in order to take care of her. But we backed off from that militant attitude. And we decided that we weren't going to declare war every time we turned around in order to, you know, and they said, you need to fight for your daughter, you know. And yeah, sometimes in a fight, you can go too far.
Yeah.
And and the kids, they had a lot of pressure, you know, because they had to compete for her attention. And I wanted to make sure that they didn't have to compete too hard. And so...
And how do you feel you guys did overall, now looking back? So she's passed away 2 years ago, correct?
Last year.
It was last year?
It was last year.
Wow, I thought it was 2 years ago.
Well, let's see, the pandemic spreads everything.
Yeah.
So everything now in my timeline is pre-plague. So before the Great Plague and during the Great Plague.
There you go.
But yeah, it was last.
Okay.
It was a year ago in February.
So now looking back at how you guys handled that and trying to balance that with your other kids, how do you think you succeeded? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you were at?
I think we were a little bit better than half.
That's good.
I mean, I can see so many areas where, I mean, I wish right now this interview were taking place 25 years ago because I knew so much.
You had all the answers then.
Everything was down, and I had the verses to prove it.
Yes. And now you can't find the verses, and you don't know what you knew anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what. There was a point in time where I wanted all my kids to survive to adulthood. And I felt like that was a really good, realistic
That is a real
goal.
good thing.
So,
you know, my daughter came in, she turned 20 in April. And she came in on her 20th birthday, and she's all happy. She says, I beat teenage pregnancy. Which we were very happy to. We celebrated that also.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was crazy. At first, she took us back. We weren't sure what she was talking about.
Yeah.
We're like, what? And then we realized what she was saying.
Well, the other thing that we did is the other kids were responsible for her care, but we also didn't overburden them with that. We found in some of the families that the parents were more likely to use the other kids as a respite, you know. Okay, go take care of your sister. Go do this. Where we tried not to do that with our kids, and they may disagree with us listening to the podcast, but what we tried is not.
We're having them on next week, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. They will.
We're going to get to the rest of the story.
Yeah. Give me time to submit my resignation as a pastor.
Yeah.
And then we'll.
It seemed to me like in the funeral, I saw him there, but then in other times, I never detected any what would I call it? What's the word I'm looking for? Like, you know, dissatisfaction, or
Like
it's not
resentment?
the word resentment. Thank you. Any resentment at all towards her or you guys with her or anything. I never detected any of that with them. which was always interesting to me.
They seem to really love her, and of course they've always been for each other. And even now, all three of them, they're living in Austin, and they all kind of...
Your daughter lives there too?
She moved up there to be with her brothers.
Nice.
And so they all watch out for one another. And that wasn't something that we orchestrated. I think that was something that the Lord just gave us, you know, because, and part of it too, we were conscious of that. When we saw, like, for example, Elizabeth, she's, I think, a year older than Kirsten. And so when Alyssa got really sick, this was about 10, 12 years ago, when she got so bad that we started having to have nurses in the home, Alyssa lost her room because that's when Alyssa went on the trach.
Elizabeth lost her room.
Elizabeth lost her room. So for a year, she slept on the couch.
Oh, wow.
And her bedroom was cardboard boxes with her stuff in it. And we always called her Cinderella because of that.
Yeah.
And then I took the little 5x5 breakfast nook on the back of the trailer, and I put a little wall there with a door, and so that became her room for a while. And so she...
Yeah, cry me a river. I lived like that my whole life. I always got that. I always got the maid's quarters in Mexico, which was the dinkiest little... My wall was 1/8-inch plywood. That was the wall of my room, 1/8-inch plywood.
Well, then you can identify.
And it was so small, my dad made the little tiny bed. He had to put it on stilts, so I had room to put my clothes underneath it. So I had to climb up it with my back against the wall and get up on top of the bed. That was my room. So cry me a river. Of course, the 2 billion people in the world that don't have a room, they're saying, that sounds pretty nice right now.
Yeah.
I would kill for 1/8-inch plywood. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, she could identify with you probably, and she'd be like, "Man, I did have it good.
I did have. I had a couch. You had a couch. That must be nice."
She finally got her own room about 2 years before she moved out.
No one. And he says, "I can't understand why they moved to Austin."
Yeah, and there have been people that have asked us. They said, you know, your kids, they just moved away and they never came back.
It's like weird.
And I said, we have a 1,400 square foot home and half of it's a hospital room. So there's no place to come back to.
Yeah.
In fact, when Matthew was going off to college, he was in his room, you know, and I said, "Hey, you going to be packing up your stuff?" "Nah, just leave it here for a little while." And I got my tape measure out and I'm starting to measure. Whoa, Dad, I'm not even gone yet. I said, "If you want your stuff, pack it up."
Oh, what did you have any type of philosophy in raising your children on? Because in fundamentalist churches, it seems to me to be real easy to fall into the idea that corporal discipline is the solution to the problems. If you spank your kids, they're going to go the right way, and you're going to have good kids. And you never seem to have that type of mentality, is what I've noticed. And I think that you've probably took some sling and arrows for what some perceive to be your blasé parenting.
I had a lot of advice. Brotherly advice, brother. I'm just telling you, you know, arm around and let's talk about this. But I came from an experience where I had a dad who drank a lot and had other problems. And so spanking to me originally was, I always associated it with child abuse, because my dad, when he got drunk, he would just beat the snot out of us. And that was his form of discipline. And depending on where the level was in the bottle would depend on what kind of discipline you got. So I had a very skewed idea of what discipline meant. And I remember when I first got saved, I was in the church, and there was a brother who had a little 3-year-old girl, and Steve had Sharon. And so Steve took Sharon, and he just whacked her on the bottom. And I had been saved just a couple of months, and right away I was going, "Hey, wait, what's going on here?" You know, I was going like, "What did you do that for?" And especially, what are you beating on that little girl for? And then he did something that just blew all my brain circuits. And he turned her around after he spanked her, and he said, "Sharon, I love you." And then she said, "I love you, Daddy." You know, I thought,
See? See?
The worst things ever was that for me. He would spank us, turn us around, and say, "Now hug me and tell me you love me." That was just the worst. I would prefer. That was worse punishment than the spanking. The spanking doesn't hurt that bad. It only hurts for a little while. That, having to swallow my pride, tell him I love him after he just hit me.
it's the humility, right?
That was what? 20 years ago. He's still whining about it.
Yeah.
It's burned into my brain.
And so I saw that, and so that got me immediately to thinking, what's going, because my resolve at that point in time, because I still had a lot of things that I had to resolve in my own brain. I had a lot of stuff to get over. And so I had made the resolution that, no, I'm just not going to have any kids, because I'm not going to take the chance that I'm going to screw up my kids like my dad screwed us up. And I wasn't going to do that. And that was actually Dale. Dale took me aside in Mexico. We were in a little prayer meeting in one of those villages, and I was very piously espousing my views and my righteous views about not bringing children into the world. And you know how Dale is.
Oh, yeah.
In his very loving way, with his half smile, he said, "Brother," he said, "if the Christians don't bring children into the world, then who's bringing children into the world?" And I thought, well, the wicked, the evil. And he said, So I need to bring children into the world? And he said, yes.
Yeah, he was a firm believer on the importance of having children.
Oh, yes.
As being a godly duty.
Yeah, and
which I actually think is true.
It is.
It's antiquated, but I think it's true. I think he's right.
When I started seeing it from that viewpoint, I realized how skewed my idea was, and that that if I was going to be a parent, that of course, there's no guarantees. You're raising human beings, so I made the decision then that I was going to change, and so I was already attracted to Judy in other ways. So when I got back from Mexico, I started courting her. And
you said, "Judy, I've gotten a commission from God."
Yeah.
Well, it was from Dale, but I'm thinking that came from God.
Yeah. And I didn't lay out exactly what my plan was, but you introduce this little at a time.
Yeah.
But I did see a lot of macho egotism. What I saw was a lot of this chest puffed out, feathers fluttering, intimidation over the kids, where especially in public. I don't know what they were doing behind closed doors, but I know that in public there was this open rebuke. And not everybody, but just certain individuals, and seemed to tend towards, the fundamentalist type thing. And I think part of it was the fact that there were some fathers out there that were really afraid of what their kids were going to look like to others.
Or what they themselves were going to look like.
And as an extension, what their reputation was going to be based on what their kids are. And so your kids then become this showpiece. And I remember there was a family that came through one time. They were traveling singers. And they found us, realized we were, and they just showed up. Oh, these guys are singing evangelists, where they had their kids all in line, and everyone had matching outfits and the perfect haircut, and they all performed. And it made me sick. I didn't want my kids to perform before anybody. I wanted them to be real. And so today, some of my kids still have the reputation of openly sleeping during the meetings, and I never made them, sit up rigid, If you're gonna, I want you to stay awake, but if you're gonna doze off, maybe I'll join you.
I think it runs in the family.
Yeah, I've been known.
Yeah.
But I've told everybody, I said, at least I'm in church.
Yeah.
I may be asleep, but at least I'm in church.
Well, what I always told everyone is, why don't you go take over his night duties with Alyssa for a month, and then you come tell me about staying awake in church. That's right.
Sleep deprivation. I remember there was one case, my middle son, I won't mention any names, but it was Matthew. And we had taken Ken Kunihiro out to lunch, and during one of the mission conferences, and or it was a revival or something, I can't remember. And so Ken Kunihiro, in his deep voice, He was saying, "And what is your name, son?" And Matthew. Oh, Matthew, like the Matthew in the Bible that left his tables and forsook all to follow Christ and left everything to follow Jesus. You're like that Matthew, right? And Matthew looked at him and he said, "Forsake all? No way." Oh, well, at least the boy is honest. But we didn't live close to the church. I purposefully moved a little bit farther away from the church because I didn't want my living room to be Grand Central Station. I wanted my kids and my wife to have a place that they could come to, that they could feel like was theirs, and it was private. And of course, that was before nurses, and then that opened up a whole different dynamic. But at least originally, I wanted to kind of insulate them from this showy, putting my kids on display type thing. And it was a temptation, because the pressure was there. Well, my kids, they're this, and my kids are that. And I just knew that they're going to see enough hypocrisy as it is. They're going to see hypocrisy in me and in my wife, and I just don't want it to go overboard. So in that sense, I tried to insulate them a little bit from that, so that I wasn't putting them on show and that they didn't have to behave. I remember when Samuel was little, he was out by the baptistry, and there was one of the brothers came down and said, "How are you doing, Samuel?" And Samuel, I think he was like 4, and he was like, "I'm doing good." He said, My mom and my dad are teaching me how to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir." And, "Oh, your parents are teaching you that?" "Yeah." But in that, I wanted him to be as natural as I could. Natural's not a good way to say it, but I wanted it to be real.
Yes.
I hated the put-ons. I hated the not necessarily so much in our church, but just the stereotype, with the right kind of haircut and the right kind of dress. And I came out of Roman Catholicism, and there's few churches that have greater hypocrisy than Roman Catholicism, with the priest and the get up and all of this air of holiness. I despised that. And so I despised it when I saw it in myself, and so I didn't want my kids to necessarily be infected with that. So whether that worked or not, you can ask them what their experience was, but that was the reason why we kind of backed off on the show. The other thing, as far as discipline was concerned, is I really latched onto that verse that at least the first part of it, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. I didn't take it as so much of a promise that if I do this, I'm guaranteed to have
this result,
children. I don't think that that's what the verse is saying at all. I think it's talking about generalities and what training is. And I'd already been well associated with what training was. Having been in the military, I knew the term training very well. I knew the difference between training and discipline. And training is repetitive. Training is done first of all in a low impact situation before you get to the fire. You read the directions on the fire extinguisher very calmly in a separate room. You prepare for it. And so in things like taking the kids to restaurants, you want your kids to be able to behave in a restaurant. Well, we would play restaurant at home, and we would make it a little game.
Is that how you got out on not taking them to the restaurants? No, we're playing restaurant here.
Yeah. But especially with boys,
yes.
They would say, "Hey, let's go to this restaurant." And they said, "No, I can't go there." And they said, "Well, why not?" I said, "Because it doesn't have buffet in the name." I said, "I don't go anywhere where it doesn't have buffet somewhere in the name."
Yes.
Because I got boys.
Yes, exactly.
And they are going to eat.
I'll have what you're having and what she's having.
But in the training, then to me, that cleared up a lot of this idea with discipline. Because of a lot of fathers I found are disciplining their children too much because they're not consistent enough themselves. And so because of their inconsistency, they're still spanking at 6, 7, 8 years old. My goal early on and I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. But I wanted to stop spanking by about 2 years old.
So tell me a little bit about how you view what spanking is and what's the value of it, or however you see that. What
I think the value of it is that, and I know that maybe I'll go to jail for saying this, but that God instituted.
the good thing is no one's listening.
No, you have no viewers.
No,
So
you're
perfect.
safe. This is like speaking into the abyss, and the
Yeah.
abyss does not speak back.
There you go. Oh, well, pain is a great teacher.
Uh-huh.
You touch a hot stove, and you learn the first time you are never going to touch a hot stove again. And so, what my philosophy was with spanking is, number one, I wasn't going to spank for mistakes. I was going to spank for if they knocked over the milk on the table. I'm not going to spank you for that. You know, if they got super excited on something and they did, and they just, I can't even think of any examples now. But mistakes.
Yeah. Exuberance.
Exuberance, maybe errors in judgment. You know, I wouldn't necessarily spank for that. What I would spank for was direct rebellion, premeditated disobedience, where they knew what they were doing wrong but did it anyway, and I would try to limit the things that I spanked for. I wouldn't spank for everything. I remember one time I spanked one of my children because I just in a bad mood. I was frustrated. I wasn't going to take it anymore. Get over here. Bam, bam, bam. And I think I caused some damage in doing that because my child didn't know why they were being spanked. All they knew was Dad was mad, and that's why I'm getting a spanking. And so I tried to limit the things that I spanked for. And it seemed to work till by the time 2-3 years old went by. Occasionally, maybe I spanked a couple of times by 4. Pretty much all of our spanking, our wooden spoons and our dowels disappeared by the time they hit kindergarten. And by then, because I looked at it, I looked at the like the dogs in the military. Man, dogs in the military, they are impressive. Those dog handlers, they are impressive because very quietly, they speak, and those dogs right away, they snap to attention. They're listening to their owner. They're waiting for the next command. And I'm thinking, man, if we can do that with a dog, why can't we do it with a kid who is infinitely more
Intelligent.
intelligent, thank you, than a dog is, and able to comprehend. And if we can put a dog on voice command, why can't we have a kid on voice command? So if I tell a kid, hey, don't run into the street, and they have no respect over my voice, then they're going to do what they do anyway. The other thing is when we corrected, we're not really a yelling, throwing things kind of family anyway. But I wanted to be able to tell them something in a normal voice without having to raise my voice and have them respond to that. So with discipline, you train them in responding to different voice commands. And then in doing that, then at least when they're young, you can get them under control where you say, hey, stop running. You know?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents, at least in my experience, and I would put myself basically in that practically, I would put myself in the same category. But a lot of parents don't realize that your kids not only learn the words you're saying, they learn the tone it's said in. And I don't think we realize. We think stop and stop are the same word, and they're not the same word.
Right.
Stop for if a kid is used to hearing the stop, I've had it, stop. If they're used to hearing that and that means stop, well then stop doesn't mean stop.
It does not mean stop.
It doesn't mean anything.
Right. And I felt very strongly about that. And so that was kind of the philosophy behind our spanking. And I don't think, and maybe I did, maybe there was an exceptional case here and there, but I didn't spank any of my kids past about 4 years old.
Okay.
We were pretty much done. And
what was the response of that as far as in people outside your family? I mean, like, I would assume that not everyone agrees with that.
Oh, definitely not. And the macho type dad, you know, the one who parades around the house and he's the king of the hill and everybody's going to do what he says. that kind of a father, that particular type didn't agree with what I was doing. They felt like I was lax and that I was being too liberal with the kids. But by the same token, I wanted them to be real. You know
what's interesting to me, and I don't know if this means anything, but it seems it's one of the things that's always struck me recently as being kind of odd, and that I've never talked to anybody on this issue where they said, and I'm sure they're out there, but I've never spoken to anyone who's told me, yeah, there's a lot of times I wish I would have spanked those kids and I didn't do it. But I've had a lot of people tell me, yeah, I spanked them a lot of times I shouldn't have spanked them. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
How I think back and I can't think of any time I'm like, I should have spanked that kid. I knew I should have done it and I didn't give him a spank. And maybe because I spanked him too much. Maybe I'm not the right test case, right? I'm not. It's anecdotal for sure. But I look back and I think, yeah, there's times that I should not have done that.
Yeah, and I'm probably also portraying it much better than it really was.
Well, of course, that's your prerogative.
Yeah. But spanking too, I got to thinking about what spanking is, and it's a way to communicate with a child when you can't communicate any other way.
Yeah.
I remember one of my kids, they maybe 2 years old or so, and we were in line at the store, and my child was like, I want that. And I started having a little bit of a meltdown right there in line because I said no. And I was actually going to give it to him, whatever it was that was at the checkout counter, a little piece of candy or something.
Right.
I was thinking, man, I think I'm going to buy him a piece of candy. But when they start demanding it, immediately I changed my mind and I said, nah, I'm not going to give him the candy. And so then I bent down and I whispered in my child's ear. And my child immediately changed and settled down. It might have been Samuel, I don't remember. But immediately settled down. And then I stood back up and problem solved. And the lady behind me, she was like, sir, I want to compliment you on the way that you reasoned with your child. and went off into this psychobabble stuff. And she said, by the way, what did you whisper in his ear? And I said, oh, ma'am, I just whispered a Bible verse. If thou beatest him with a rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with a rod and shalt deliver thy soul from hell. He about came unglued.
See, my dad used to reason like that with us too, but less secretly.
Not so tactfully, or what?
Not so tactfully is what the word I'm looking for. He used to grab our necks. And hard. I mean, it wasn't, he didn't like lay his hand on our neck. He used to pinch our neck and pull him to his face. He thinks he's whispering. He's not. He's super irritated with us. He's like, and I used to pretend, he's saying something very interesting to me. So I just be like, and everybody, or he's thinking, he's saving us the embarrassment of him yelling at us. But everybody knows. Everybody's looking at us like, oh, he's gonna get it when he gets home. It never actually. It was very embarrassing.
I can imagine.
Mikey, not subtle.
Not subtle at all.
Yeah, but spanking is a way of communicating to a child when you're not going to be reasoning with them in any other way. And so once other things become available, then the rod is it can be put away. And I found especially when they became teenagers, the world opens up a host of ways in order to put pressure on your child.
Yeah, there's pressure points everywhere.
Oh, I'm telling you, there are so many ways. I cannot control my teenager. Oh, really?
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 That even doesn't require imagination. It's like,
no, it's just there.
It's like they think, I got all this privilege, all these rights. It's like, no, you have all these pressure points. You're starting to find out what it's going to be like to be an adult, where there is infinite ways that you can be hurt.
Yes.
There are infinite ways in which you can feel tremendous pressure.
Yes.
You're going to find out what your boss feels like when you come to work. He's like, oh, no, I can pressure you in so many ways.
The other thing, once the kids got older, is that I kind of instituted is I gave them the right to challenge me.
Talk to me about that. That's interesting.
And I remember there was a situation. Samuel wanted to go somewhere. He wanted to go to this particular place, and I just didn't think that it was a good idea. And so I said, no, you can't go. And that was it. And he came back later. He said, Dad, I want to talk to you about that. I really want to go. And he said, these are the reasons why I think it's a good idea for me to go. And I actually changed my mind. He actually had some pretty decent reasons. And I said, well, okay, that's fine. You can go. And so I tried not to. Early on, it was complete authoritarian. A 2-year-old does not have the right to challenge me. And a 2-year-old does not have the right to make their own choices. I remember when I was little, I remember a situation where we lived in a little Airstream trailer. There were 5 of us. The 6th hadn't been born yet. We lived in an Airstream trailer. My mom was doing the best she can, trying to raise kids in a tiny little trailer and feed us all and do all of this. And we had a family member come over and say to my mom, you really need to give these kids choices so that you can empower them. And she said, you know what? You're right. And she looked at all of us kids. We're all there in the living room, and there was a piece of plywood against the wall that would level down, and that's how we knew it was time to eat. The plywood would go over our laps, and that it was time to eat. And she said, this morning, kids, we're all going to have a choice. And we're all like, yay. She said, do you want breakfast or not? We want breakfast. But then once the child got older, I wanted them to have a little more control over their environment and over their situation. So if there was something that a decision that I made, I always tried to give them the opportunity, if they had good reasons, to at least challenge my decision and have some sort of an input. And then, of course, as they started getting older, then gradually releasing those controls and giving them more and more autonomy as they...
Well, see, they're smart kids. So how often did they get you to change your mind?
It was as they got older. Matthew was in debate. And so...
I wonder why he went into debate.
So then I remember one conversation I had with him. He said, Dad, you're using circular reasoning. And I didn't know what circular reasoning was. So I actually studied debate tactics in order to talk to Matthew because he was very good. And then Samuel began. I didn't I didn't let them have electronics early on, but as they began to get into middle school, high school years, I relaxed and let them have more electronics. And Samuel could. It didn't matter. Parental controls.
Yeah.
I put those little parental controls on the thing, and he would bypass them and then reinstitute them, and I would never know anything. So I was like, you're in the hands of the Lord. Whatever you're doing online, I said, I can't. There's no way I'm going to be able to monitor that.
I wanted to ask you about that. Now you bring that up. That's interesting because, like with that, that was before. I mean, that seemed like we were very advanced back then. It's like, oh, we got all these electronics, there's these. Mm-hmm. But really, compared to where we are now and what these devices will do, that was like using the Fred Flintstone telephone back then.
Right.
I think about the cell phone I had in those times, right? And it's like, oh, this is amazing. And now you look at it and you're like, what is this? This won't do anything.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What do you do with this? Right?
Yeah.
And now it's just the where we're at right now is mind-boggling, and I just don't. I don't know. What do you think about as far as that is with kids and raising kids in the age of social media, and what advice would you give? I mean, it's hard for me to think about because I didn't have to deal with it. There was nothing of that when I was raising my kids, right? But now there is, and so you have, and the effects that social media is having on children is catastrophic.
It is.
And this is what's interesting to me. And it's interesting to me across several dimensions. That forever evangelical fundamentalists like ourselves have been ridiculed by the world for being the world is ending, everything's horrible. Well, now all these people who are not Christians, they're not believers, they don't believe, they're atheists, are now, we're talking about people like Brett Weinstein and Steven Pinker and these guys. These are not Christians at all, right? They're not Christians or don't believe in God. They're atheists. And they're all saying, oh, this is real bad. This is real bad. All of this is all going to go bad. They all sound like fundamentalists now on this stuff, right? And all the liberal views of, the progress is wonderful. This is all being discarded by these people,
right?
Because the effects that social media is having, particularly on young girls, is documented by scientists to be just, well, it's what evangelicals, fundamentalists have been saying it was for years.
Right.
We've been saying for decades that this stuff is not a good thing. I mean, they mocked us when it was about TV, right? TVs, be careful with it. This isn't a great thing for your kids. And it's a lot of mocking Christians. Now they're starting to realize, wait a minute, that was just the tail of this dragon that's now come out.
Right.
I was just hearing an interview on a podcast I listened to. A woman wrote a book about the pandemic that there is in young girls transitioning, becoming trans, not because of. And I don't want to get into what reality there is and how they describe it, but just to put it in her words, right? That there's this gender dysphoria and they don't really have it, and they're faking it because all their young girlfriends are. It's like mass suicide, basically, right? It's this epidemic of these young girls thinking they need to transition into men, and not because there's any actual reality behind it, if assuming there were to be. But put that aside. And this she writes this book. This is a liberal, atheistic scientist saying there's a huge problem with social media, and it is a moral issue. Incredible that they're coming out and saying this now. I think they're too late.
They're too late. I think part of it is the fact that now they actually have paper trail is not the right word, but there's actually a documented trail. Where back before, our kids watch an R-rated show, it's hard to correlate any activity with a show that they watched or with the activity of watching TV. There was no real way to track it. Who knows whether a kid watches 10 hours of TV a week or whether it's 2 hours? Where now with social media, it's all out there in the open, and there's a track record.
Purpose of social media is to track.
Yes, exactly.
That's what people don't realize.
Right. No, you're
Facebook,
absolutely right.
Instagram, all of these, they exist to track your movements.
Yes.
That's what they're getting for that free service. They're giving you free communication, free whatever it is you're getting from them, right? Free affirmation, whatever it is you feel you're getting from them, they're giving it to you for free. The charge that you're paying is that they get to know everything you like, everything you look at, how long you look at something, how long you pause in your scrolling at every ad, and so they can track. Tracking is the point.
I'm gonna get off Facebook right after this interview. But here's the thing, and I think my MySpace was big, and I was introduced to MySpace by my oldest, and I found out that he was because he always seemed to have money, and I knew he wasn't selling drugs, but I was like, man, you always seem to have money. What's the deal? And he was making MySpace pages for the kids at school.
Oh, cool.
At whatever
Smart
it was,
kid.
a pop, And so he was cranking them out and making a decent living. So I took him down to the courthouse and made him get a DBA. And I told him, we're going to pay taxes on that money.
I just tax my kids.
There you go.
It was close enough.
But I didn't understand the whole draw of MySpace back then. And I didn't understand. All I saw was that I looked at his page, and it wasn't awful, but there was some stuff on there that I did not agree with and that I didn't think should be. And so I said, that this is public, that everybody else sees it, and that, if you go get a job, they might see it, so whatever you post on there. And I think it kind of tempered him a little bit, plus the fact that I was already raising my kids to stay a little private. We stayed a little bit. We lived aside from the church, so our living room was not a church meeting, so to speak, and so I insulated him a little bit from that. We stayed just a little bit more private than maybe some others. I didn't have him on show, and so none of the three seems to be overly involved in social media right now. But they have gotten into it, and the scariest thing is that whatever you put on there, somebody's going to be able to see. And what Matthew does now at Dell, part of his job is teaching executives and other people exactly what their social media presence ought to be and the dangers of it. So I think he backs off on that. But the only way that I can, because I'm not an expert in technology. I think I'm smart enough that I could do anything that I wanted to do with computers. I just have absolutely no interest. Mm-hmm. I'm bored stiff with technology. I'm bored stiff with computers. I do what I need to do at work. I make my spreadsheets. I do whatever I need to do in order to help myself in my job at work. But I don't dream about it on the weekends. I don't relish the thought of working with technology. If my phone breaks, I call my kids. Okay, hey, my phone's not hanging up. What do I do? Okay, Dad, go to settings, go to this, go to that. And so for me then to monitor my kids, the only one that I ever faced it really is with Elizabeth, because social media was hot and heavy when she was in high school. And my kids in college, I've already, they better monitor themselves, because I'm not monitoring a 20-year-old that's living away from home. But for my daughter, I did, and I couldn't really tell what she was doing on social media. I made sure I had access to her Facebook page, but there were already other things coming in that kids were already starting to gravitate away from Facebook and going to other. There was Instagram, TikTok was just coming up. There were other things. And so with her, basically I had to monitor her behavior. And so if I got up to use the restroom and I noticed that, it's 1:30 in the morning and she's there and she's got her, then I would go, hey honey, what are you doing? What are you on? Show me what you're looking at. And, she'd put the phone away sometimes. Sometimes she'd show me, but then there were other times she put the phone away and that's how I began to monitor it in terms of how it affected her behavior. And so when I noticed she was up late at night, when I noticed that she was maybe a little sullen in areas or other things that maybe affected her behavior, then I was able to kind of, see what her activity was on social media. And we would talk about it openly. As far as I was concerned, that we would talk about it openly and try to make her aware of how it was affecting others. And my kids weren't necessarily followers anyway, so they didn't have that natural. None of my kids had that natural want to fit in kind of personality anyway. And so I guess I feel real bad for kids right now, where like young girls that are getting their total self-esteem from social media. It's I feel real bad for them. Yeah,
that's one of the problems. They're all people have no privacy anymore, and it's self-inflicted, and they don't understand the importance of keeping things to yourself and having a life that no one else knows about.
Yes,
and they just don't comprehend it. It's like anything that can get a like is what you're going to put out there, because that's what you want. You want to put something on, and then you want affirmation. Right? And that's why there's no unlike button. It's because even though that would actually be more helpful, right? But they're not. These media sites, social media sites, aren't interested in being helpful. They want to get you to post, because then that gets people to read, which gets you to post, and then that gets people to scroll past those ads. I mean, this is what it's all about. It's how can they get you to look at these ads? And it's not about what would actually make the user experience better in an absolute way. It's what will get more people, more eyeballs onto these advertisements. That's all it's about. That is what their business model is.
And it's about the facade too, because everybody knows Facebook and social media, Instagram. This isn't real life. You know, you're not gonna post your most depressing, your biggest failures. You're not gonna post those. You're going to pose for people to approve of what you're doing and what you're saying.
Well, it's true, but then when those things that you're mentioning that you wouldn't normally post, if that will get affirmation, and this is what they're finding with these young girls, they're finding this epidemic in young girls that when they come out and they say, "I'm really a man. I was born in the wrong body," everybody, including all the adults around, everybody starts telling them how brave they are.
You're right.
How wonderful you are. You're so courageous. And they couldn't get noticed by anybody ever before because there's some kid who knows nothing, right? But all of a sudden they come out and say, "I think I need a transition." And all their teachers, a lot of, they, in their mind, all these adults and all their friends also, everybody is just tripping over themselves to praise them.
I wonder how many of these girls don't have good role models to begin with.
It's an epidemic, so it cuts across thing. It's this phenomenon. It's like the suicide phenomena of young girls, which is also much more than young boys. Young men are having a lot less problem with this than young women. Young women get so much of their self-worth from the affirmation they get from their peer groups and from adults. And I mean, that's just so much about women because they're more appearance-oriented, right, than men are. Men are more performance-oriented. Right? And so they get their affirmation from what you think about what they do, right? What they achieve. And that's how men are kind of, you hardly ever see a man in, shorts that come up to their butt cheeks, right? It's like, you're not going to see a man that way. And you wonder why is it that women runners need to run in bikinis? Right. And if it does, why aren't men running in those? So, it's weird. Well, there's just that thing about beauty. It's about appearance. It's just, they're wired more in that direction. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's strange, but yeah, there's this mass epidemic, and I was listening to this, and it's coming now from, I wouldn't say more credible sources, but it's coming from sources you weren't expecting it to come from before. Right? These are people, and what's so hilarious about this, in my view, is that these. Are we good? Okay. What's about this, in my view, is that these are people who are at the same time tripping over themselves to affirm adults trans. Like, oh no, that's beautiful and wonderful. And, these are people that understand that they were born in the wrong body. And so they're tripping over themselves to say how supportive they are of the trans community. But that when young girls are doing it en masse, that's all hysteria and it's epidemic. And this is something else entirely. And it's not that we're against being trans. It's a wonderful, they're very conflicted, in my view, over the issue. It's certainly not the Christian perspective of it.
Right.
But putting aside their conflict and the trans issue, but their documentation, their information on the girl problem, the young girl problem, is very accurate, and it's very data driven.
It is. We got a chance to meet a lot of Elizabeth's friends. From the high school, bring them over to the house, and there was very definitely an epidemic at Southside over these lesbian issue and
that's another one. Yes.
And the trans issue. The lesbian issue has been going on, I think, a little bit longer, a little bit more embedded, but my daughter would talk to her friends, and some of them would come out as I'm a lesbian, and my daughter would ask them, well, why? And they really couldn't find a good example except that it was cool.
That's right.
And because of this social acceptance, it is the cool thing to do. And they were actually there was a young man that was in the band, and he declared himself. He said that he was going to identify as female, and they actually let him for a short period of time use the locker room where the girls would change. And that ended very quickly. Elizabeth and some of her friends shut that down right away.
See, in today's climate, that would be very hard. It'd get hard. It gets harder and harder to shut it down. You'd be canceled out of the school, even if the school officially didn't oppose you.
Well,
your social peers would.
Judy and I were stunned because the principal was actually considering that this was the right thing to do. And of course, not only us, but other parents made the issue, and the students themselves brought it up as an issue. Most of the kids, Elizabeth said, were okay, but she said, no, that's absolutely not okay. And I remember a situation she got into where there was this guy that wanted to make her his girlfriend. And I won't go through the whole details of the story, but basically the gist of it is that, no, I'm not interested. She said, you're not a man, you're just a boy. And she said, you can't even pull your pants up. She says, at my church, there are real men, and I know what a real man is, and you're just a boy. And it was in public in front of the other friends, so this little gangbanger went away with his tail tucked between his legs, and that's why I mentioned the idea of role models. Do not have a good male role model, someone who is responsible, who treats women with the kind of respect that they need to be treated with, who lives by honor and by, all of these male characteristics that were traditional down through the years of what a real man is. We've got that all turned around where now Bruner is courageous, but a soldier on the battlefield is not, where we've gotten it all turned around about what real manhood is. And I'm wondering how many of these girls do not have a good male role model in their house.
That's a good point.
So many of these girls at Southside come from broken homes. And some lived with their mom, some lived with their dad, some lived with their uncle. But the men are, they're just, it's hard to find a good example of a man now. And you've got guys that are strong, they're macho. I remember I was out in front of Southside one day. Samuel was in middle school, getting ready to pick him up. And this pickup truck came up behind me and honked the horn. And I'm like, and so I wouldn't move. I'm parked there first, I'm going to stay. He pulls up beside me. He said, hey, that's my spot. And I said, sorry, sir, I'm parked here. And so he started puffing out his chest, and I kind of lost control a little bit. I said, hey, buddy, you feel froggy, leap. He pulled his truck around, got ready to get out of the truck, and there was a Southside police officer that was nearby, saw the interaction, came out, and walked up to my truck and said, is there a problem here, sir? I said, unless he gets out of his truck, there won't be. And I got to thinking, and I'm getting angry. I said, what is this, this self-interested, what's the problem, This, and this guy was ready to fight over being parked right there. And I got to thinking about it later. I said, Lord, thank you so much that you intervened. Because when he came out, Samuel came out with his friend. His friend got into this guy's truck. Matthew got into my truck. I said, how is it that he came out and saw the two dads on the ground scrapping it out?
It's over a parking spot.
Over a parking spot.
Yeah.
But these girls have no... maybe they do. I don't know. But I think a lot of them just probably don't have a good male role model to look up to where, they're looking for answers. They're looking for a way to fit in. And so now this is what society tells them, and their families aren't telling them anything else. So they're vulnerable to it.
It was interesting to me that there's a number of people who are on internet or on the web, on what we might call social media, like YouTubers and things, where they're broadcasting through there, kind of like we are, but secular. And there's quite a number of them that surprisingly will not allow their kids to be on social media. That's what they say anyways, which was interesting. It's not what you expect. Very much like what you would think of a fundamentalist position where, like, you're not going to have a TV. That was my house, right? When I grew up, no TV.
We were the same way.
Yeah, you were the same way. Do you have a TV now, by the way?
What I remember is y'all had a TV but y'all had like a movie night on
Yes.
Friday, so we would go over for that, and y'all would play.
But they didn't have
Yeah.
cable. They had
it was
they had a
cable.
monitor.
Y'all had
When you were
cassette
when you were
player.
coming over, we had a monitor. Yeah, and we would have Friday night movie night, and we would review the movie ahead of time to see if it was. And I wasn't super strict, I wanted them to be exposed to some stuff, but there were definitely our limits. So, but yeah, that's what we did then.
Yeah.
We changed once we started getting. I think once Matthew hit about the middle of high school, he changed and I started relaxing. And it wasn't for the kids; it was for my wife's sanity, because she's home all day long with Alyssa, and here I am being strict. Nah, no TV, no media, no this or that, and my wife couldn't leave because Alyssa was there, so she had to be there. And so I relaxed it a little bit because she needed some diversion and she needed to be able to watch her program.
Christians were so many fundamentalists. I don't know about Christians but the kind of Christians we are and our circles we're in, very, very strong against what was on television. Mm-hmm. And I'm not knocking that. I think they're ahead of their time, and that's my point, right? That now people are catching up with this in every way. I mean, Christians, same way with saying rude things. Christians have been against this forever. All of a sudden now we have cancel culture, which is essentially saying Christians were right. You shouldn't be saying rude things about people. Mm-hmm. You should be more careful about what you say about people, and idle words do matter. And now that's what cancel culture is, right? They're all pretending they invented this, but Christians have held this position forever that, we should speak about each other charitably and not use gossip and not use idle words. And that's what it is. So it's very interesting to me that, but as far as TV, they were like, Christians have always been like, oh, this is terrible. What's on? You have no idea now. Now with streaming coming and everything's on demand. So it's not like you can say, okay, what time of day am I going to let my kids watch TV? It doesn't matter because you can watch anything you want at any time of day. There is no more, the prime time or the family period of time when they only show family show. That's not. It's all on demand. It means you can go on, you can click on anything you want of any rating or no rating and watch it at any point, any time, on any device, anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and it's not geographical anymore.
No.
It's not that I'm home, so I'm going to watch TV. You've got your smartphone.
It's 100
and
it's 24/7.
Yes, that's
and
exactly
it's access to every bit of content out there.
Yes.
At all times and to everybody. There's no discrimination. There's no way. Before it was like we can't show this type of programming before 9 o'clock in the night because the kids go to bed and then the adults can watch Johnny Carson or they can watch whatever it is that has more cutting edge or whatever you want to call it content. And it's not that way anymore. You can watch that at any time of the day, anywhere in the world, in school. It doesn't matter.
Well, consider this. If I'm going to tell a child to do something, I have to have some moral capital in the bank in order to be able to be, in other words, if I'm going to tell a child, demand that they do something, I better at least show that I'm trying to practice what I preach. Whereas with the social media and the on-demand and the internet just in general, the parents themselves have no control. And they're inundated with the very same thing that their kids are inundated with. Maybe not in the same way. A parent may not be addicted to Instagram or TikTok or one of these social media sites, but they could very well be addicted to other things. Questionnaires, YouTube, on-demand movies, or internet porn, or whatever vice is out there. They could be addicted to the same things. And so how can they tell their kids to watch what they're doing when they themselves can't control it?
Well, if I was raising kids now, knowing what I know, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about computers and about the technology. I don't keep up with it as nearly as I used to when I was programming more. But I'm pretty knowledgeable about it. And knowing what I know now about their business models and what they're after and that, I would not allow my kids to be on social media. They would not be on Facebook. They'd not be on Instagram, any of those. And if that meant they have flip phones, then they'd have flip phones.
Yeah.
And obviously they say, well, they're in school and their kids. Well, I understand. And that argument goes for anything you want to say you don't want your kids to be on, right? They're not going to be on drugs, which means I'm going to do everything in my power to keep them off. It doesn't mean that I think I'm superhuman and there's not ways that they're going to access what they want to access maybe.
Right.
But it's not going to be because I allowed it. It won't be because I'm paying the phone bill. It won't be because I'm providing the devices. I wouldn't do it. I mean, people don't realize, they think this is innocuous. And it really isn't. I mean, I use Facebook. I put out it's not that I hate Facebook, although I wish there was alternatives of some way of communication, right? But people don't understand what these, let's just take Facebook, but they're all the same way. Twitter, they're all the same. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on researchers, on scientists, neuroscientists, social scientists, to discover what would make you scroll and stop at the ads. That you want to continue to scroll on Facebook is not an accident. They didn't happen on this. This isn't something that organically just happened and they tapped into it without realizing it. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars figuring out how to keep you scrolling the longest time possible.
Right.
Longest time possible. What button will make that happen? What like button? What type of, where do we put the button to make it where you will scroll longer? And it's amazing the things they've done. When you go through and you read, and they've actually documented this and how they've made this work, and the small choices that seem to be completely insignificant have huge impact on how long you're willing to scroll. And their goal is to get you to spend the most time they can of your life scrolling through Facebook, scrolling through Twitter.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's not just a problem with the kids.
No.
We have so much lost productivity at work.
Oh, it's horrible.
Because of so many people are computer based now, and especially now working at home, where you may not have somebody in the office monitoring, how long that you're on social media or another site or whatever it is. And so it's hard for us to demand our kids to do something that we're not willing to do ourselves. And I think a lot of it just has to come down to we've got to put limitations in, like what you were talking about. And I was able to do that some early on. Where we just were pretty strict with the electronics early on. I was very strict with the gaming, with the type of games. I remember they came home with, I don't remember what it was called, Black Ops or Call of Duty or something like that. And it was a scenario game, and I had gotten an Xbox for the kids so that we could do the interactive stuff, the boxing and different fun things like that. But he brought this home and he said, "Dad, let me put it on and show you." So he got on, and this soldier gets out of a helicopter, and he gets out, and immediately he blows this guy away. Goes, hides behind this cinder block wall, blows two more guys away. And then he gets hit, he explodes in a pool of blood, he dies, game restarts, and then it goes again. I watched this for a couple of minutes, and I said, son, stop for a minute. And he stopped the game, and he says, "What, Dad, too much violence?" I said, "No." I said, "The violence is in context, it's a war, but let me ask you a question. What do you think about that guy right there?" And I showed him the bloody body of the guy that he just wasted. And I said, "What do you think? Did he have a family? Who's going to be expecting him home tonight?" I said, "Were you justified in blowing him away?" I said, "Did he actually fire on you, or what were your rules of engagement with him?" I started asking him questions, and I said, and I said, "And how do you feel when you blew him away?" I said, "Did you get sick to your stomach at all?" I said, "Are you going to lose any sleep tonight? Are you going to think about it? Are you going to dream about that?" I said, "No, probably not." And it was like, he was just like, "So does that mean I can't play it?"
Oh man, what do you think about this whole thing of this from a Christian perspective and a pastor perspective? What do you think about this whole thing with the trans movement? I mean, I'm not really asking about the issue itself. I think that's self-evident of anyone who's of our doctrinal persuasion. But as far as dealing with this, what you have these young girls we have this mass epidemic of this, and that are getting wrapped up in this. And this isn't like just lesbianism. This is different. They're not just walking around saying, I'm a man, and putting on man clothes. They can go to Planned Parenthood, and with no psychiatric evaluation, no doctor prescription, they will give them testosterone. All they got to do is fill in a form. They can go to surgeons, not minors, but teenagers, can go to a surgeon and have their breasts removed and start surgery transitioning with no psychiatric evaluation whatsoever. And not to say that psychiatric evaluation should be the gateway to it, but you would think that even from a secular worldview, you wouldn't do such an invasive procedure without assessing the person's mental health, right? And there's surgeons who won't do it. It's not like all doctors will.
You can't get bariatric surgery for being overweight. I mean, not bariatric surgery, but the band.
Gastric bypass surgery?
You can't get gastric bypass without counseling.
I know. You can't get contacts without a prescription from a doctor. You can't buy contacts, even if you know your prescription. I don't go to the eye doctor. I prescribe my own, but I have to get them from Mexico because they will not sell me contacts unless I go to a doctor and he confirms what I identify. I identify as a minus 0.45 on my left eye and a minus 0.425 on my right eye. That's how I self-identify, right? No, that's not good enough. I have to have a doctor who affirms my self-identity as not being able to see. And you can self-identify as a man, as a young girl can self-identify as a man, and that Planned Parenthood will give you the meds to make that happen with no doctor.
Yeah, that is absolutely crazy.
It's absurd.
And I don't know legally. I don't know any parents that have tried to fight that legally. But there's got to be some sort of a loophole, some sort of a legal way to put it.
So my question is this. You have what my point is this is far beyond even lesbianism or any other issue we've had. This is where, how do you deal with this? What is the solution for these people? This is my point on this, and it's kind of a point that I've been worried about for a while. And that is, I feel that Christianity has really fallen behind on these issues. I feel that we have not done a good job at keeping a pace of things. I think that the old style Christian response has never been very good, and it's now showing its weaknesses. And that is, and this is my view. You can correct me if you don't think I'm presenting this properly. Which is one thing I'd like to hear from you. If you think I'm right or wrong on this, and if not, you tell me. But the way I see it is that Christianity has forever been saying the problem is sin and the solution is salvation, which I agree with in a very broad way, but it is extremely broad. And it doesn't deal with the situations we're dealing with now in any specific way, is how I look at it. That's my view. But I don't know what the solution would be. Like, what do you tell a girl in this situation? If you get saved, it'll all be okay? I'm not sure that statement is true.
Well, your vices did not disappear when you got saved.
Well, exactly.
And neither did mine. I still had to deal with them. And think about what, just in terms of, take the COVID, for example. What are we crying out for right now with this COVID-19? We're crying out for a vaccine, right? We're crying out for something that we can take a shot of that will make us immune to the virus itself. And so, yeah, the simplistic approach, just trust God, just get saved, and God will transform your inside. Well, if transformation came automatically, how do we have so many verses in the New Testament that could talk about good works, that talk about, young men there in Titus, where it talks about showing thyself a pattern of good works. We have so much preaching about developing our character, about developing. And so I think part of the solution, and it's not, I don't mean to be oversimplistic, but we have to figure out a way to immunize these kids from these influences to where the influences are not so great. And I know the influences when my kids were growing up and your kids were growing up were a little bit different, but our struggle was, how do we provide a family unit, which is fast disappearing and almost non-existent? How do we provide a family unit and a family structure to where these things coming out are not as attractive for the kids, to where they're not as, where we can build some sort of immunity in there. And I'm not talking about just, just get them to memorize verses, memorizing verses or not, but a lot of these conflicts starts way back when they were 2 years old. If you're raising your kids on instant gratification from the time that they were young, you haven't learned to tell them no. You haven't learned to help them to regulate their own
appetites.
You limit how much they eat, the candy that they, and you teach them to regulate these things. You teach them that there's certain desires that they have that are not appropriate to act upon, and so they have the ability to be able to inoculate themselves against some of these temptations that are coming along. And I think a lot of it is the fact that some of these girls have no ammunition. They have no ammunition. Something comes along and there is nothing in their structure, in their character, in their makeup, in their family unit that tells them that this is otherwise. And even though the parents may disagree, they're completely helpless. They can't tell their child anything. I think the challenges that we have just in raising human beings in general is so great that it's amazing any of us does any good as parents at all.
Yeah.
It's just that even in a good environment, it is so incredibly difficult to predict a good outcome for a child. And it's something like this, but some way it has to come down. If we're looking for ways to deal with it right now, with the girls that are going through it right now, that you said it earlier, we're too late. We're probably not going to be able to help some of them right now. The ones that we're going to be able to help are the ones that are 2, the ones that are 3. Here's the problem: is I just heard about a mother recently who the little girl said that she was a boy. So immediately, the mother takes her down to the doctor and starts letting her wear boy clothes and starts doing all these things.
Yes,
shame on you, Mom.
Yes,
shame on you.
Yes, it's these. A lot of them are these ridiculous celebrities, who so many of them come out and said, "Yeah, my daughter has identified as a boy, and we're affirming their." And it's like a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old. It's like, what are you talking about? That's just insanity. They are. To me, it is the secular version of the problem I found in myself as an evangelical father. Right? Same thing you were describing. When I look back at my parenting, one of my biggest regrets was that raising my kids was much more about what it made me look like than how it was going to help them. Right. And that's hard to assess at the time, and I would never have admitted it at the time. As I look back at it, I realize that much of not all, but much of the motivation behind my decisions I made, behind how I handled it, was more about me, the pastor, having these kids that were raised the way was supposed to be done, right? This is the way a pastor raises his kids, right? And it's that, look, this is the secular version of this, in which they don't care about what their kid actually needs or doesn't need. Even people who aren't against the trans movement think this is absurd. You cannot have an 8-year-old making these kind of irreversible choices at that age. This is not something that an 8-year-old needs to worry about, even if it were true. And so let's just put aside the Christian perspective that that's nonsense to begin with, right? The whole thing is nonsense. Let's put that aside and just look at it from the secular point of view and say, from a secular point of view, even if you think there is some merit to trans movement, nobody thinks that an 8-year-old should be concerned about their gender. That is not normal. That is not something you encourage. That's something that, if that were even true, that's something adults worry about. It's just like sex. We don't want our children worried about sex at 8.
Right.
Right? Not any kind of sex. That's just not what, that's one of the terrible things about pedophilia. It robs children of this time in their life when that doesn't matter.
Right.
And these stupid celebrities are more worried about them and their posturing to the world to say, we're so tolerant, we're so open-minded, we're so wonderful. And this is what they're doing. And they're just destroying their kids over it, which is, it's absurd. It's absolute insanity.
It is insane. And it is a form of insanity, and it's a, and I was there was a perfect example, and it disappeared from my mind.
It'll come back. But what I wanted to also ask you about on this, and this is a problem I also have with Christianity, and I want to be clear, I'm not talking about other Christians. I'm talking about me as a pastor and as a preacher, and those that I learn from and hear, I think they're pretty much in the same boat as I am. And that is, it seems like we have fallen so far behind in doing any serious research on these issues and really dealing with them in any meaningful way that helps. It just seems to me it seems that we are giving canned answers to this problem, and they're not well researched. I don't think we're providing the type of information and the type of solutions that might actually help. It just doesn't seem to me that we are. And I'm not saying that as if I've seen the light and now I have the answers. I'm saying that in that I am in the dark on this, and I do not know how to respond in a meaningful way. And just getting up and saying it's sin, it's true. I'm not denying that that is a true statement, right? But that's not an accurate statement. In other words, it's not a precise statement. I should say it's accurate, but it's not precise. How is it sin? How does it work? How does sin do that? And how do you counteract it? How do you deal with it? Just this. We'll confess it and be saved, and it'll go away. Like you said, I've confessed a lot of things that have never gone away.
Correct.
Right? But I found in certain things in my life that when I became better informed about the mechanisms that they work by, I was able to deal with them very effectively. And as long as I was ignorant of how they worked, they dealt with me. They governed me. And when I became well informed of how pornography works, when I became well informed on how the social media addiction works, right? Then I'm able to deal with that and say, okay, now I understand what's going on here. I've seen the wizard behind the curtain, and I know what the levers and the gears and everything are, and I can compensate for these things now. Whereas whenever it's like, well, just repent and just, well, that never worked. Not that repentance isn't a part of it.
You make a good point, because Nolan can probably back this up, being recently a kid, is it's not enough just to tell them. It never was with my kids. Maybe when they were 3, it was enough to just tell them this is the way that it is. But as they got older, they needed reasoning, which is why I allowed them to debate me, and we discussed the merits of the case, and I think we need to be better educating our children in these areas right here. And for me to just profess ignorance, I'm not much on technology, and just hope that it works out okay. I'm like you. I don't think that that's not enough. And the children are not getting the education in the dark side of these technologies, of these social movements. But for us to be able to do that, and that's part of the idea of, inoculating your kids, giving your kids some sort of a resistance, is and I think to you, I think just labeling something as sin and, hey, that's bad, stay away from it, it's too oversimplistic, and kids don't accept that. We don't accept that as adults. If the mayor came down and said, okay, none of you do this. We're going to say, okay, that's fine, but why? What's the reasoning behind it? We're not going to just blindly follow.
And what if it's
that,
something you really want to do? See, that's the deal. One side is the rebellion of it, right? Where they say, hey, don't do something. And it's like, well, why, who are you to tell me not to hit my thumb with a hammer? If I want to do it, I'm going to do it, and I'll show you. And we do something we didn't really want to do, but we're like, no one's going to tell me what to do. That's the one side. The other side is, don't do this thing that every fiber in your being wants to do.
And everybody that you respect is doing.
Yeah.
Your movie stars.
And then there's the further one, which to me is where the Christians are. So you have the one you're like, don't hit your thumb with a hammer. And then you have the one where everything in me wants to fornicate, don't fornicate. And it's like, well, I want to. And then you have the Christian side, whereas everything that I don't control is pushing me to do it. Everything I have control over doesn't want to do it. This is Paul, right, in Romans, saying the evil that I don't want to do, that's what I do. So now there's this war in me, and I want to win the war. I don't want to do this. I do not want to live that way. But but Paul says, I can't find the way. I can't find the way to do what I want to do and not do what I don't want to do. And nobody's offering me any tool set for this. Nobody is saying, here's the tool set. They're telling me, quit wanting it. Well, duh. It's like, what's the solution to losing weight? Well, don't want to eat fattening food. Well, thanks a lot.
Like they told a guy one time, they said, if you work out and you begin to work out and you begin to start eating more salads, you are going to become addicted to it, and it's going to be part of your lifestyle. And the guy wrote back and he said, no, I am pretty sure I can quit working out anytime I want.
Yeah, exactly right. I know. It's just crazy. They're all like, if you would just do it for a month, you'd never stop. I'm like, give me a break. I've tried things for a month, and it's perfectly easy for me to stop.
Yeah.
Just pray every day for a month, and you'll never want to quit praying. Right.
Yeah. Well, the parents, they have little ammunition because they have little power themselves. They're not controlling their own appetites, and so how in the world can they tell their kids to control theirs? And we do have tools in the New Testament about self-denial, about one of the things that was interesting when I got saved was that I was told drinking is bad, which wasn't hard to convince me of that because I drank a lot, and so I saw the evil effects of drinking.
And you had your dad.
And I had my dad, so it was not hard for me to alleviate that. And so I was a Christian now. And so that meant, and I tried still going to the bars and to the clubs, and I said, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to witness to my fellows. But it's amazing how hard it is to witness when you're drinking your Coke and your glass of Coke looks just like a JD and Coke. There's no difference in the two, and the music is loud, and the skirts are short, and well, let me show you a verse in the Bible right here. There's no way it doesn't work. So very quickly I had to disassociate myself with everything. But now all of a sudden, here I am, and I was still in the military, and I'm in my barracks room, and it's Friday night, and it's 8 o'clock, and I'm going, wow. And so I already read my Bible, and I'm not like some, I have friends who can read the book of Isaiah for a quiet time. And I'm not there yet. I'm not there. So, but I already read my Bible. I already prayed. I already did everything that a Christian young man is supposed to do. And it's only 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Now, now what am I going to do? I'm doing good because I have alleviated the sin. I have said no to the... But we live in a vacuum. And so if you take something out, you better be ready to replace something in. When Paul says, put off the old man, he doesn't leave it there. Okay, put off the old man. Then he says, put on the new man. So he's very obviously stating that we've got to replace something. We can't... our life is not a vacuum. And so what I had to do is, okay, Friday nights, I can't go to the bars anymore. Well, I got to do something productive, something that's not boring, Got to be something exciting for a 21-year-old man to do. And so then I started looking at alternative. We got some of the young people. We did Bible studies. We went out and did other things. We had youth night. We had fun, and did other things that were more constructive. And I think part of the problem we might be having with our kids is, and like me, when I got rid of TV, I was actually in a better situation because we lived out there with a little bit of land. And so they were able to go outside as young kids a lot more than maybe kids nowadays. I wasn't stuck in a little 700 square foot apartment. I think if I was in a 700 square foot apartment, it would have been infinitely more difficult to get the TV out of the house than being out there where we had chickens and we had other things, and they could go out and they could do things, and so they didn't miss the TV so much.
Right.
And I think part of the hypocrisy of raising kids is we have got them into this idea of Christianity is a show. Christianity is something that we do on Sundays when the brothers and the sisters are watching us. But when we get home, we're back to our old ways, you know, where they have no ability to be able to say no to these things, and there's no alternative. Okay, so I tell my kids in high school they're not allowed to date. Well, you know, there's got to be, okay, so if they're not going to date, if they're not going to go down this traditional path, what are they going to do? And I think it's, I don't know, I'm just throwing out straws there, trying to figure out, because the momentum right now is so huge and so overwhelming that it's going to take more than just, you know,
it's going to take more than platitudes.
More than platitudes. It's got to be a reality. And so if your Christian life from the time that you were 6 years old to the time that you were 14 years old was not reality, it was just a show, then you've got nothing, you've got no immunity to be able to say no to these things coming up.
One of the things I see from the perspective I'm talking about, I get yours, and I think you're right on that. I think there's more than one perspective that has to be addressed in Christianity. One is the hypocrisy side, the reality of it is the side you're on, and then the side I'm looking at, I think, also has to come into play, and that is the lack of real answers on issues. And I think that the reason why this has become, I think this has always been a problem going far back as I can tell in Christianity, because I don't find old writings where I think they have any good answers either. I think it's all a lot of platitudes for the most part, which I'm not talking about the scriptures. I'm talking about, you know, Christian preaching, Christian teaching. There may be out there. I haven't found it. Everything I found going back to reading John Wesley and Spurgeon and Whitfield and whoever, I find them to be basically the same. I don't find that we've improved or devolved either. Just kind of stuck to this platitudinal type answers of things. And the reason why I think it is becoming so apparent right now, and incredibly apparent, is that there is such readily available information of the world, about the world we live in, both the physical world, the moral world, every part of it, everywhere. So it used to be, if you wanted to have a discussion as to how exactly the human mind worked, well, you're going to have to go to college, you're going to have to go to postgraduate, you're going to have to get up into the doctorate level before you're going to be privy to a real discussion. I mean, to say, no, it's not so simple. The human mind is very complicated, and they start, you know, for instance, in that, or the human psychology, or how planets work, or how gravity works. All of that was way out of the reach of the average person to ever hear such a discussion. And now you can go on YouTube and hear the highest level discussions on any subject, where they are not going to be telling you the simpleton way of explaining it. They're going to sit there and do the mathematical formulas, or they're going to tell you and cite the literature, tell you where you can find this. You can go online and read that literature for yourself. And so you can be involved in the highest level discussion on everything. So why do human beings fornicate? Evolutionary biologists think they have an answer for that. And it's not going to be the simpleton answer. Now, I think they're completely mistaken. I think they're completely wrong, but they have an answer. And it's not a statement answer. It is a explanation answer. and they're going to go through the whole, what they believe to be the whole evolutionary process and how human beings came into being. And they have all these explanations to tell you why you want to fornicate. And I actually heard a whole discussion on that by a prominent evolutionary biologist explaining why human beings are promiscuous. And you listen to Christians, you ask a Christian, pretty much any of them, why are they promiscuous? Why are men promiscuous? And generally you're going to get, well, they're sinful, which I believe is accurate and incredibly imprecise. It's not a why. They're basically just restating the problem with a different word, right? They're labeling this behavior wrong and restating the problem. They're not offering any explanation. What is the mechanism of sin? Why does it work the way it does? How does it work? Now, before we're like, well, it doesn't matter. We just know it's wrong and Jesus is right and you get saved and that deals with this. And that may have been fine for a very long time. But in a time where people are increasingly wanting to know the why and the how, Christianity seems to be coming up empty-handed. And it concerns me.
No, that's a good observation. Because we have the access to some of the greatest things. A doctor in China can confer with a doctor in America, and then they can compare notes, and we have incredible advantages to all this information. But then the same point, we also have access to all the worst information in the world, and it does affect our kids too. I think they're finding us hollow.
They're
finding us hollow, and I think there's some that are trying to like in the areas of addiction. There are some that have really worked out.
Yes.
Because before, when it came to, like, for example, pornography. Pornography was pretty easy to deal with, relatively speaking, because you stopped going to places, you stopped buying certain things.
Shopping at places that sold things.
And problem solved. Stimulation goes away, and basically the problem goes away. Your nature doesn't go away, but the opportunity to interact with it, whereas now, we have a whole new problem, and it's devastated our society.
Yeah, and we're getting to a society where you cannot rid yourself of the sources.
No, you can't take a filtering tool and filter out everything that you want, because you still have a password to it, or you can't just say, I'm not going. I mean, everything in media all around you are promoting certain things.
And you have to have access. I mean, if you're going to live in the world, increasingly in America anyways, you're going to have to be at a computer. You're going to have a device in your hand. It's going to be a prerequisite for pretty much any job. I require it at my job. I'm in construction, and my guys all have to have smartphones.
They do.
Right. And they have to have it. It has to have data access, because that's where we get our plans on, our blueprints, and we don't do paper ones anymore. So you have to have an iPad, you have to have an iPhone, and if you have an iPad and you can look at a picture of a building, you can look at a picture of a naked person.
That's true. So somewhere, somehow, the answer has to come.
Well, yeah.
From the ability to be able to self-regulate, the ability to be able to tell yourself no, to be able to.
Well, it goes to the point of the diet, right? The most successful diet ever that actually works is to no longer want to eat what you shouldn't eat.
Right.
You can have a refrigerator full of it if you don't want it. Like I hate sweet drinks. I just don't like them. You can pile them up all around me. I won't drink them. I don't like them. It's not because I'm health conscious. It has nothing to do with that. I just don't like them. I like unsweet tea, right? And I drink gallons of it. But sweet tea, never touch it. I just won't drink it. And so that's if sweet tea were the root cause of some disease, then I have the cure for it. Just don't like it. Well, it's a little harder when you like it.
Yeah, and I'm very self-righteous when it comes to pies and cakes and everything. No, ma'am, that's okay. I've said.
I'm very disciplined. Yeah. I'm self-controlled.
But put a family-sized bag of potato chips in my hands, and of course it has to be Diet Coke. Potato chips and Diet Coke, because the other is too much sugar.
Yeah.
But I will eat the whole bag and won't self-regulate whatsoever.
Yeah.
Until I get sick. But the idea of putting into our character the things that I think part of the problem why we are having so many problems combating these things and why they're actually so attractive to us is because we have, like I said before, with pastors, we've let ourselves get lazy. So we perform in the pulpit, we do what we're supposed to do, and the actual work of caring for the sheep, we tend to leave that off. Or others in the church take example of it. And I think in terms of spirituality, we've been very lazy. And we ourselves are concentrated with the outward, and that's it. And we've taught our kids to be concentrated with the outward, and that's it. And we haven't put those things in our character that would give us the ability to where now it's available. Okay, maybe I need a filter in place, or maybe I do need some regulation. Maybe if there's a husband who has a problem with internet pornography, maybe he needs to bring his wife in, and they become a team in helping to combat this particular issue, or whatever it is. Or if you have a child that's getting too much into a certain thing, getting in there with them and helping them out and saying, okay, how can we change this? How can we work with it?
But I think it's also very important that when we do that, like with children especially, that we really have answers to give.
Well, we've got to be honest about it too. We can't be superficial and say that's bad, don't do it.
Right.
And we can't tell them everybody that does this are evil, because my daughter has friends, and at my house, I don't care whether you're a trans boy. I don't care whether you're a lesbian girl. If my daughter invites you over to the house, you're welcome to come. Mm-hmm. My house is open door, and they can bring whoever they want home. And so we've had girls in our house that are open lesbians, But when you talk with them and you interact, they're not. They don't have this outward evil character. They're very respectful. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. They're very nice. They're compassionate. They have a lot of other good qualities to them. So when we tell our kids, people that do that, they're just evil.
Yeah, that doesn't.
The kid.
When they become exposed to that environment, they find out that that's a boogeyman story.
Correct. Now, what we've done with our kids is we've always sought to be open with these particular issues, and talk about them. And we've talked with our daughter about lesbianism. Where does it lead? Why are these girls so involved in it? Why does it seem to be popular? And in that regard, I think a lot of parents, what they do as soon as their kid mentions the word lesbian, don't you ever say that word in my house again, And we completely cut off all communication and conversation about that particular issue. So then the kid realizes, man, now what if I go tell Dad that, I'm attracted to men? He's already shut me down, and he's already said that every homo in the world is evil and needs to be destroyed, and I ain't going to tell him that. So then they keep it in themselves, and they don't feel open to be able to talk about their parents. Their parents are so full of this outward condemnation and
yeah,
where it cuts.
It's demonized. We tend to demonize it.
There you go.
We demonize it, and as opposed to saying this is sin, this is what sin is, this is why it's sin, and this is how this acts, this is how this manifests. This is the mechanism, or possibly the mechanism behind this, and explain it out and explain why it's wrong and why we believe it's wrong. What all of those things you can go through and explain. We're not demonizing neither the actual behavior nor the person doing it, right? Because I think that one reason why we saw so fast how the U.S. flipped on that issue, on the issue of gay marriage, for instance. Almost, it was just like they were preparing constitutional amendments for marriage to completely accepting gay marriage across the country within years.
Right.
So fast, incredibly fast. And you're wondering, how did we flip that quickly? I think that people all of a sudden became very aware and started having, a lot of people started having interaction with gay people and realized that the demonization wasn't true.
Correct.
Right? And so then what the average person I have found does, in my experience, when something's been demonized to you and you've bought into it, so this is the most horrible thing in the world and these are the most horrible people in the world, and you buy into it, and then you have an interaction with someone who is that way and they're not the most horrible people in the world, then your reaction is completely against it.
Right.
Right? And this is what we found in Mexico. The priests would come out and demonize us as street preachers, and that we're going to eat your children, we're going to rape your women. I mean, it was just, the worst possible thing they could say about us. And people hated us. They're like, oh, these are child eaters and woman violators. These are the hordes coming over the wall and all. And then for whatever reason, they would meet us. And we would talk, and we were normal, and we're just people, and we actually cared about them, and we're pleasant with them, which is very important reason why Christians need to realize that they can't respond in the kind.
Right.
We need to respond to hate with love.
That's correct.
It's very important, but and not with irritation or apprehension, which is natural, but we need to not do it. Anyways, we would do that, and then it was an immediate flip. It's like, wait a minute now. That priest just completely lied to me. He told me that these people were something they are nothing like. And then they immediately become Christians. One of the best things that the priest could ever do for the cause of the gospel was to completely, libel us.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're doing in the churches.
I think we are.
With these issues. And my kids have experienced the same thing, with especially with my daughter, with her friends that were lesbian. That, some of them were very nice girls, and some of them still friends with us to today. Mm-hmm. There's still some of those girls that will, they'll call us up, hey, how you doing? Oh, good. And so if I was the kind of father that said, you get that trash and you get it out of my house and you don't ever let them come over again. I don't think we're giving them enough of a reality there to be able to deal with the situation.
And we're living to me, it's kind of like living in a world that my granddad talked about, my granddad Dale, when he was in Texas back before he moved to Mexico as a missionary. So we're talking about back in the 50s, right? He had a conviction that he would not buy anything where they sold alcohol. So anywhere that sold alcohol, he wouldn't shop there for anything, not for gas, for groceries, only at places that were dry where he shop. And you could do that in Texas in the 50s. H-E-B didn't sell alcohol. A lot of gas stations were dry. There were whole counties that were dry, right? No alcohol sold. So you could do that. Well, then he goes to Mexico as a missionary. And he gets in his car with all his kids, little baby, and he drives into Mexico. And they get to the first gas station. He needs gas and he needs milk for the baby. He walks in there and they have a refrigerator full of beer. And he realizes every store and every gas station in Mexico sells beer. If they sell anything, they sell beer. So now what are you going to do? You going to leave and just let Mexico go to hell? No gospel for Mexico because I can't buy where they don't sell beer? Well, that was a huge problem for him.
Yeah.
And there was no thinking about it. It was turn around and drive back or kill your convictions. Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah.
That was, that's like, whoa, oh no. And I don't think we're preparing them for a world that looks like this. That it's easy when there's, 3 gay people in the city and they're, outrageously gay, right? They're everyone knows them. They're in the bad, seedy side of town or whatever. Like, the way it used to, at least the stereotypical view of it back in the 80s.
Right.
Well, now this is, even though they're a small minority still, but it's growing, and it's in business. Your boss is likely to be gay. There's a strong possibility. Your coworker, your brother-in-law is likely to be a gay, or your sister-in-law. I mean, you're likely to have people that are trans or gay or whatever in every area of your life.
That's right.
What are you going to do? How are you going to deal with that? And to your point, getting to your point where you're saying the response of, we're not having that anywhere in us. We are going to, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's the mentality of separation, and the whole doctrine of separation. We tell our kids, be very careful to choose your friends, and actually very wise advice. Be careful who you allow yourself to be influenced by. But when you are the only Christian in high school, what are you going to tell them? To have no friends?
Yeah.
You've got to have some friends. And so I think we need to re-examine this whole doctrine of separation. I remember it was probably late 90s. We went to visit this place. It was called Brazos de Dios. It was over by Waco, about 400 or 500 acres that this group had bought. And we went to a fair that they had because they did a lot of self-sufficiency things, and so we were raising chickens and doing other stuff, trying to pretend like we were back to nature.
And rabbits.
But
I remember you had rabbits.
We had rabbits, and we ate rabbits, and we did all that. But if we had to survive, we would have died.
You would have died. We all would die.
We would
all these
die.
idiots who think they're going to raise enough food to feed a family, they don't know what it takes.
So we went to this place because this place, all the families lived on this place, and they homeschooled their kids, and they taught their kids these values, and they insulated them and sheltered them from this evil outside world. And what they were doing is growing these kids up in this place. And so they touted this. Man, they had books on it. They had, how to make food out of manure. I don't know. They had all kinds of stuff. They were teaching.
Food out of manure. That's when you know you're a preacher. You can just be extemporaneous that way.
Okay, scratch that from the live
That was
broadcast.
great. I love it.
So they were doing all these things, and they had this huge presentation and all of this, and it was very impressive. And you had these kids, these teenagers and stuff. And I remember I walked up to one table, and this woman was there, and there was a book there on teaching kids stuff, and I picked it up, and I was interested in it. And I was asking the lady, I said, what's the premise behind this book? I said, and she says, well, the first thing it does is it teaches them respect. And we teach our children to tuck our shirts in here. I looked in, my shirt was untucked. And I'm like, put the book down, walked away with my tail. I'm the evil outsider. But anyway, and so we went through this all day. And the point is that at the end of the day, they had this thing. You go in, you watch this little film. They show their community and everything. And I got to talking to one of the leaders. And I said, what's your biggest problem out here? He said, the biggest problem is our young people are leaving in droves.
No.
And we can't get them to come back. And I was like, that's amazing, because this whole thing was set up for your young people. It was all set up for them. And I think part of the problem is what we're doing is maybe we're insulating our kids too well, and we're trying to keep them separate too much to where, and I've been downgraded. What do you let your kids go to public school for? They're going to teach them evolution there. I said, yeah, they probably will. But where else? I want my kids to learn early what it feels like to be a square peg in a round hole. I'm not going to insulate them from the discomfort of being in a situation where they're the only ones, or where their viewpoint is the minority. I want them to know early on what it's like. And I said, what we decided to do was, rather than insulate and homeschool our kids and keep them away from this evil, filthy world, is we're going to take them to public school, but we're going to monitor. So when stuff comes up like lesbianism, stuff comes up like drug abuse, and getting high and getting drunk was a huge deal. Everybody got high and everybody got drunk. What am I going to give my kids to be able, so they can be around that, but not get sucked into it? And a lot of it has to do with keeping the communication open, keeping honest about it, not doing these little techniques like demonizing and or oversimplifying or doing these things, but to have an honest conversation so that so the kids don't feel bad that that they've been exposed to this, and also so that, man, our kids ought to be able to come to us and say, hey, Dad, I got a problem. I gotta. At some point, they're going to stop doing that. They're going to shut down, and they'll go and find their answers elsewhere. But But man, if we're just shutting things down,
but here's the thing on that, and this is what I think is a huge mistake on this, and I'm not for or against public schools or homeschooling. I personally don't like homeschooling because I did it, and didn't work. It wasn't good for me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a fit for me. I needed to be in a school where I should have been. So, but I don't have a dog in the race. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. Or dog in the fight. I mean, either way. But here's the deal on that. I think too many parents are not cognizant of how much sway they have in their kids, even on these issues, right?
Very good point.
You have these kids. These kids really do respect your opinion more than anyone else, unless you completely lose that. You naturally have that respect from them, right? And if you would just keep abreast of where they're at and have better answers, again, answers, not statements, not the statement of creation, the answer of how creation worked, and really investigate it for yourself and be able to really talk about it intelligently. It doesn't take much. Now, I know a lot of teachers are going to be upset with me about this, but I was in school. It doesn't take much to be more intelligent than these teachers.
That's correct.
On these things. They are not, they are very, not all of them, there's some great teachers in the world, but it's like great basketball players. It's like 0.1%, right, that have true talent. And there are some truly talented teachers. That's a talent given by God. Most of them don't have it. That's just naturally. Like most preachers aren't talented. Most basketball players aren't talented. That's just how talent works. Most teachers are not talented. They're just doing a job. They have the textbook, and they're just telling them what the textbook says. And it doesn't take much to overcome that. And if parents would have the answers, they could take their kids and say, I know this is what they're teaching, and there's nothing wrong with her hearing this theory. It's a theory on how things are. And there's a lot of problems with this theory. Let me explain some of them to you. And there's another theory that we have that's the theory that the Bible gives us, and that there is a supreme being, a creator and then you go in, you can explain this. And if you can explain it where you intelligently deal with all the sides, and they can see that this isn't just saying, no, we're the sect of the whatever, and we reject everything, and we only accept this. And then they see, hey, my dad's real smart. My mom's real reasonable. And they're aware of this. They know they know this theory, and they talk to me about it. And I actually know more about it than the teacher's telling me. And no, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
To me, that's the approach we have to have, because sooner or later, right? You can homeschool your kids. It doesn't mean that when they hit 20, you think that that's now set in stone. I've changed dramatically over what I used to think when I was 20.
Absolutely.
Right? Even as a Christian, right? My doctrine, my view on science, a lot of things have changed dramatically in my own mind from the time I was 20 till now. So keeping my kids out of public school to keep them from evolution doesn't guarantee anything.
No.
I need to provide them the tool set to understand and evaluate all these things.
And they need to know that it is not evil to look at more than one side of the issue.
Correct. That is a good point.
With my kids, we would talk about some of these things, but I noticed that there were certain parents that would not even entertain the word to come up in conversation. Like,
to even mention it was sinful.
Yeah, to even and to deal with them, you've got to be able to talk openly.
Yes.
And I feel like in a lot of ways my kids were more intelligent than I was, and so that gave me a real challenge, to try to stay relevant with them. And so I saw a real value in having them in public school and then monitoring what they were being taught, so that we didn't necessarily go into the classroom and dive bomb the teacher and tell her she was evil or anything like that, but to give them the different sides of the issue, because they are going to reason it out anyway. They are going to look at the sides and they're going to reason it out.
Yeah, and I never encouraged my kids to even challenge the teacher on this stuff, so long as it was being presented as information that you could there's nothing wrong with learning something that's not true.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? You can learn something that you don't believe is true, and you can be tested on it. And what do? You don't write on every answer of evolution and test, it is fake, it is false. That's not, you answer the question as they're asking. It doesn't mean you agree with it or you think it's a true statement.
Yeah, Christians do not have an approved reading list.
That's right.
Like, these are books that are banned and these are books that are...
That, in my opinion, is going to be the big advantage that Christians are going to have in the world that is being created now by the secularists. The secularists are becoming the secular equivalent, in my opinion, of the Dark Ages, where they will only allow you to read certain things, to know certain things, to say certain things. They are shutting down their worldview. They're closing down they're putting blinders on themselves and saying we do not acknowledge anything outside of what we think to be true. This is the Dark Ages.
Aren't you shell-shocked to see that actually happening?
Well, I've been predicting it for a while.
I didn't necessarily see it coming because it's always been open thought. We'll entertain every viewpoint except for Christianity, of course.
Yeah.
But it is amazing now.
Yeah.
How much where they will run somebody out of office. I was preaching the other day and I was saying, they're doing this and that, and I said, but I draw the line at John Wayne.
Yeah.
Now they're taking
taking on the patron saint.
Yeah. But it's how we combat this reverse demonization, because while we are demonizing them, they are to our children doing the same thing to us, and they're demonizing us. And so then if we're shutting everything down, we're just reinforcing that demonization. If we open it up and have reasonable conversations with our kids and give them the opportunity to be able to debate, to be able to prove their side of the issue, to be able to openly talk about certain things, then we combat that reverse demonization.
Right. So the reason why I've been predicting that what we see now for quite a while is because my view was that secularism is religion. It's a religion.
Correct.
And that as a religion, it has some extremely weak points. It is very flawed as a religion. And I couldn't see any way that they could overcome those flaws. Mainly, they were not taking into account the reality and the severity of a sin. Now, they define sin differently, right? So basically, sin for a secularist is what we would call a phobia. Anything that you could call transphobia, homophobia, all the phobia, that's sin. Phobia is their sin, right? Well, let's assume that's a real sin, which for them it is. Any real sin, that's not easy to undo. Right? Christianity has an answer for sin, and it is the most extreme answer imaginable. Somebody innocent, God himself, dies on the cross. It's the only answer, and I'm speaking from a secular point of view. It's the only answer we can come up with for sin. In fact, Christianity's point is, if there were any other way possible, that's what would have happened. That's the only way we could answer sin. That's how we see sin. We understand sin to be so intractable, so real, so severe, that it required the death of the Son of God himself to fix it. And there was no other way. Now they say, well, that's silly, there's other ways. Well, there aren't other ways. And that's what they're finding out. They don't know how to deal with it. So if you're ever at any point in time been homophobic, transphobic, or whatever phobic they put, you've been a sinner. They don't have an answer. They can't solve it. So you're done. You're canceled. You're condemned because sin is real and you deserve to be condemned. And they want forgiveness. They're all talking about how can we have forgiveness, but they don't have an answer for sin. Can't solve it.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a Son of God to die.
That's true.
And if they get anything less than that, then they're saying the sin wasn't that bad after all. So if anything else could solve the problem, then it was never a problem to begin with. So what are they canceling anyone over? So they're stuck in a completely intractable position where they've created a whole religious system. They have their whole sin they've created, their whole category of sin. They have no forgiveness, no redemption, no absolution. It doesn't exist. So they're in a tough pickle.
Yeah, what they wished for is coming upon them.
Yes, it is.
And it is fun to watch.
It is. There is a certain delightfulness in it.
Yeah.
It is true. Well, I really appreciate you coming in.
Okay.
We are so out of time.
I enjoyed the conversation.
It was great. It was fantastic. And I, again, really appreciate the example you've given as a parent and the breadth of it. I mean, it's just for one person to have that much of experience and all across the board is amazing. And I know it's not the type of experience anybody would wish on anybody, but you know, like Paul says, that God puts us in positions like that, some of us, so that we can give help to others. And I know you've done a lot of that. You've dedicated so much of your life to helping others, and that is certainly very much appreciated. You've blessed all of us.
Well, I
And
appreciate
you and
saying
your
that.
wife. I know she's not in here with us. She's over there in the corner monitoring.
She's probably the one
and
that should have been
if you
here.
notice Brian, whenever he's about to answer, he looks in the corner of his eye to get that's Judy over there giving him the and then she goes and that's why he just changed.
Yeah,
like
like
the whole making manure into food. She's like,
She's like, oh, no.
no. No, we appreciate both of you. We love you both. We really appreciate you coming out here today and talking to us. And,
Well, it was an enjoyable conversation.
great.
I
Good.
appreciate you being here.
Next week, we are going to be here with Anna Jackson. Did you know that, Nolan?
I think so.
Yeah. That's Nolan's wife.
mentioned it.
She's going to be on, and we're going to have her on next week at Saturday at 9, and we got more people lined up going forward. But next week, it'll be Anna Jackson. We're going to talk a little bit about Mexico. We like to tease her about Mexico, so we'll be talking about Mexico and her experience here in the U.S. I'm very curious. She's been. How long have you guys been married?
So Friday was 4 years.
4 years. I thought so. Fred told me 3. It was 4 years.
4 years.
4 years yesterday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And little boy, Eldon,
Alden.
little blue-eyed boy.
Yep. Blue-eyed, blonde hair. Who knows whose kid he really is? I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, that boy is white, white, and blue eye. He's something else. Anyways, so she's been here 4 years, so I'm real curious to see what her impression is of the United States after 4 years and what she thinks of San Antonio tacos. All right. Well, it's great to have you guys with us. We're glad you're here. Brian, thank you so much again. We'll get you back out here again because this was a great conversation. And goodbye.